Hey everyone, it's John, your humble host here, with a quick announcement before we start the show. This episode contains discussions that may not be appropriate for everyone. When I first started editing this one, I had just planned on bleeping out some of the swears, but then I realized I would not be able to edit this episode to keep a clean tag without cutting it nearly to death. So I decided to mark this one as NSFW. While there may not be too many colorful metaphors in this one, the discussion sometimes delves into topics of a sexual nature that may not be suitable for everyone. Please do consider yourself thus notified and proceed on yellow alert. All right, let's start the show. TrekProfiles Podcast, episode 29, recorded November 2019. This is the Trek Profiles Podcast, where each episode we sit down with a fan and we hear their Star Trek story. I'm John, your intrepid host of this whole enterprise, and I welcome you to this, the Trek Profiles Podcast, episode 29. If you wish to get in touch with us, you can reach us at feedback@trekprofiles.com or on Facebook or Twitter, also at Trek Profiles. Show notes for this and every episode are also posted on the website, where I put all the links and more information about each and every show, so check it out if you like that sort of thing. And if you do like this sort of thing and you want to support us, please make sure that you subscribe to the show via your preferred podcasting platform. You can rate and review the show if you like, and just like Romulan Ale is best shared with friends, so is this show. Feel free to point your Trekkie friends this way for more Trek goodness. Sharing is caring, people. Warning! As we record this, we are in the middle of Season 2 of Short Treks, so all previous Star Trek content up to and including that point may be discussed on this episode. You have been warned. As always, my co-host is the delightfully demure, devilishly demanding, yet diabolically daring M5 Multitronic unit.
The M5 is ready.
M5, show me the news and announcements.
On screen.
There are some lightly edited outtakes and bonus material at the end of this episode. They will come after the final ending audio cards. Feel free to enjoy them or not, as you choose. The choice is yours. Let's take a look at some show feedback. Michael Bentley on the Twitter, @MichaelAngie, says, quote, "Great episode of Trek Profiles from last year. Duncan Barrett's experience of watching Trek in the UK from the 1990s and his reflections on the depressing Darmok and the lead up to the Brexit referendum are parts I can especially relate to," end quote. Well, thank you, Michael. I appreciate that. I think one of the things that makes Trek so evergreen is that it's based on these sort of universal concepts that resonate in the real world. And, people using memes to communicate just wasn't a story concept. It really came through, and we can see examples of that today. And furthermore, I think one of the things that makes the show good is that I bring on guests who are way smarter than me, and Duncan was certainly an example of that. So I appreciate your feedback. Thank you for listening, and keep it coming. All right, then, let's talk about some Kobayashi Maru feedback. These are from episode 27 with Carl Wonders. Which is more fun, firing phasers or firing photon torpedoes? Carl said, disregard that phaser order and arm the photon torpedoes. Most of you also agreed on the Twitter poll by 63 to 37%. And question 2, there's a full slate of activities in the rec hall tonight. Should we listen to Picard play the Ressican flute or Spock play the Vulcan harp? Carl made the logical choice and selected Spock. The Twitter people also selected Spock by 53 to 47%, but I'd say Picard scoring a 47 is a moral victory worthy of acknowledgement. Next question. You are now in Star Trek Hell. Will it be Threshold or Cat's Paw playing on Infinite Repeat? Both my guest and you fine people selected Threshold by 59 to 41%. Enjoy your Space Lizard Baby home videos. Next question. It's a slow night in Voyager's mess hall. Will it be Caddiscot with Naomi Wildman, subunit of Ensign Samantha Wildman, or Calto with Tuvok? Carl went full Vulcan and selected Calto with Tuvok, but the pure fun and enjoyment of Caddiscot could not be denied, and all the Twitter people selected it by 53 to 47%. And then there's question 5. Hit the Star Trek jukebox, Carl. Only 2 choices. Will it be Michael Giacchino or James Horner? Carl and the listeners were also in agreement by selecting James Horner. The final was 65 to 35%. As always, after each episode is released, I post these questions on Twitter as polls, so follow me there at TrekProfiles and you can have your say on this episode's questions. All right, enough of this. M5, let's run the show.
M5 working.
Her favorite character is Captain Kirk. Her favorite guest star is Always and Everywhere, Mark Leonard, with Michael Ansara a really close second. She really hates that TNG ignored the Andorians, but is satisfied that Enterprise made amends in that regard. She's originally from New Orleans, but now resides in Seattle, Washington, Earth, in Sector 001. It's Maggie McNeill. Welcome, Maggie, and thank you for being on the podcast.
You're very, very welcome, John. It's my pleasure.
Are you a Star Trek fan?
Hell yes. Hell yes, I confess.
You confess. That's good because your confession has been recorded and entered into the record for Inquisition today.
No, I have been a Star Trek fan since I was a kid. I was compulsive. I made my parents, we lived way out in the hinterlands. And of course, in those days, the only people playing Star Trek, there was no cable or anything. So you had to get like the independent station, and the independent station's broadcast power wasn't enough to get out to where I lived unless you had the special antenna. And so my parents, I pushed my parents to get the special antenna. And then my dad didn't have time to put it up. So I climbed up on the roof myself and put the damn antenna on so I could watch Star Trek. That's how much of a fan I was.
Maggie, what is your earliest recollection of Star Trek in your life?
My earliest recollection is going to date me, I'm afraid. I can remember when I was very young, the episode, of course, at the time I didn't know the names, but later I realized it was Is There in Truth No Beauty? And I think it was because of the really intense light show, you know, the Dutch angles, Spock going insane from viewing the Medusan. All that stuff was such intense imagery. I think that it stuck in my mind for very long afterward, even though I was only quite young. Let's just say single digits when that came on.
Oh, I'm right there with you. I was introduced to TOS as a little kid. It was in reruns, but I watched it every night on WPIX, sitting cross-legged in front of the TV. So even in black and white, some of those episodes had a big effect on me and started me on this lifelong path of Star Trek. So you started out with original series. Have you seen all of the 700 and something hours of Star Trek as we sit here in 2019?
I have not. I have not seen very much. I've only seen a couple of episodes of Voyager. I got just the episodes that I saw, which were not in any kind of sequence, which is sort of random. I think I saw 2 or 3 of them. I just didn't like them at all. They aggravated me, and so I said, no, I'm not going to watch this. And then I haven't yet seen the second half of Deep Space Nine. I had like a lot of crap going on in my life when it was being broadcast. And for some really strange reason, I'm not quite sure why, I haven't ever seen those last probably 2 seasons, even though a lot of people say it's probably the best Star Trek there has been. And my best friend actually owns the DVDs, so I have no real excuse, but it's going to happen one of these days. I'll get around to it. And then I haven't seen the recasting, the newer Star Trek.
The Kelvin movies, the movies?
Yeah, the ones with the young Star Trek people. It's I call it Star Trek babies. You know, where they started over again and
the films they made with Chris Pine and Zachary Quinto and all of that.
Yes. I haven't seen those.
Right, but have you seen Discovery?
No, I have not.
Oh, okay.
No, have not. All right. I kind of put it in the same basket as the thing. I'm mostly an original series girl. Mm-hmm. I really loved the first part of Deep Space Nine. I really loved Enterprise. Next Generation, I liked like the 3rd to the 5th seasons. The first 2, it was kind of cringy for me. And the last 2 were kind of like, yeah, you guys are losing steam. And some of the movies and the animated series. That's what I liked. That's all my Star Trek.
I would agree with you that TNG Season 7 isn't so great, but Season 6 has some good episodes in it.
It does.
Okay, good. I would encourage you to give that one a second thought if you hadn't. So
No. I've seen them all, and I know them all, but it's just, like I said, in my estimation, I'm kind of like, yeah, the 3rd to the 5th to me are like with the original Star Trek in quality, as far as I'm concerned. And then the others, well, of course, there's the third season of the original series, but we won't go there.
I will say there were some mighty fine episodes in the third season as well, which I will defend.
No, there are.
So, do you still keep up with Star Trek? Do you still watch an episode occasionally?
I still I keep up with it in two ways. I do watch episodes occasionally, and I will get into internet arguments with my friends, not with strangers. So all of you listening, don't think it. But sometimes my friends will say something like, "Oh, Star Trek is this," or whatever. Go, "Oh, actually, that's not what they said in that episode. It was this," or that kind of a thing. Or criticize the Warp 5 speed limit from Next Generation or things like that.
Gotcha. Let me ask you this question. When you watch Star Trek, how do you actually watch it? Are you watching it on your phone or on a big TV or on a big screen or on a tablet? How do you consume it?
I have never watched any show on a phone. It makes me crazy. It's too small. Most of the Star Trek in my life has been obviously on a regular TV. There was a time period I remember when I had a job where I was I was just basically a warm body in the place, like for several hours, kind of like so that they would have somebody there. But I actually didn't have to interact with any other human being or do anything. And I had at the time a one of those TV band radios. And I used to listen to Star Trek on the local station, just listening to it on the TV band radio. But for the most part.
So it was audio only.
Yeah, it was audio only. But I knew the show so well, by that point, it was like, yeah, I know exactly what's going on the screen right now. Spock is doing this, Kirk is doing this, McCoy is doing that. You know, I knew it. I mean, I know it all. But no TV. And I have a house out on the coast. And when I go out there, we've watched some Star Trek on there. They have a big screen TV now, but I don't have one of those in my apartment here. So when I do watch Star Trek, yeah, I've said it's always been on a regular TV set.
I have to say, I think it actually changes how you consume it when you go to these different devices. It's hard to get into the episode when there's all these notifications on your phone that are going on.
Oh, that would make me crazy.
That. Yeah, it's so distracting.
Yeah,
I do have to do it from time to time, but it's never quite the same as when I actually put in the disc and commit. Like I'm going to go watch the Blu-ray or something and actually sit and view it. I feel like I'm committed now and I have to watch it.
Well, when we were watching Enterprise, I had a DVD burner, and one of the settings was you could watch a show while you were recording it. And so while Enterprise was on the air, we watched some of them in real time. And what we did was started the show, 15 minutes in, we sat down and started watching it. And we just fast forwarded through the commercials.
There you go. That's the way to do it.
That was good.
Yeah, it's what people are doing today with DVRs, and there's not a single thing wrong with it.
Yep.
Do you have a Star Trek collection of any kind?
Oh, I do. Oh, yeah. I have all I bought when they first came out. Remember those cases that look kind of like tricorders shape? The blue, the yellow, and the gold and red cases for the first, second, and third season. I got those. I've got all the movies. I bought for my best friend who lives with me. We've always lived together. I bought her Next Generation, Voyager, Deep Space Nine, and I think she has bought some of the new movies for herself. And then I also have Enterprise, and I have the animated series, and I have all the novelizations by James Blish. Well, they're not novelizations; they're adaptations by James Blish. The original Star Trek 1 through 12. Those, yeah, I was getting those when they were still being released.
Well, I remembered reading. I want to say it was his adaptations of the animated series. I think there's some Blish adaptations.
Foster.
Oh, is that who it was?
Foster. Yeah, Star Trek Logs. I read those too. Those were good too.
I remembered reading the one that had the Kzinti, the cat people. Mm-hmm. And I just remembered reading it before I had ever seen animated series. I didn't watch animated series until about maybe 8 or 10 years ago for the first time. So I was just knocked out with it when I finally got the chance to see it, because my viewing of it was informed by the books, which were much deeper than what they went into in the show.
Yes.
So I really enjoyed that. And I read the Blish stuff too, which I thought was fantastic. They were certainly a great way to sort of flesh out a lot of the stuff that you saw in the show. So you've got books and DVDs. Do you have anything else Star Trek related? Uniforms, costumes, anything else?
I was never a big cosplayer. There was the only convention that was accessible to me when I was in my teens and 20s was a local one in New Orleans called, the name of it was Vulcan. And Vulcan ran from, probably the late 70s. I think the first one I went to was the 5th or 6th or something like that. And it ran probably well into the 90s. And that was the only one. So cosplaying was not quite as big a thing then. I mean, people did it. It was mostly the costume contest or whatever. But I don't recall ever doing a costume per se. Although it is quite funny because my husband, as I call him, my second husband, who I'm still very friendly with, when people ask me, like, what he look like, I always describe him. I say he actually kind of looks like a younger, beefier Patrick Stewart, which he does. I mean, enough so to where he used to actually have another person who worked where he works, who used to tease him like that when my husband would go to turn the computer on, the other coworker would go, engage.
Yeah, I knew that was coming. Yeah, I knew where you were going with that one.
But we used to joke that, I mean, we should go to a convention because if he wore just a regular Starfleet uniform, he wouldn't need anything else. Everybody would know who he was supposed to be. It would be obvious he would be supposed to be Picard. And then I could wear, with my curly hair, right, I could wear the Troy outfit and we could go that, but we never did actually get around to doing it. We talked about it, didn't do it.
But you did go to Vulcan or no?
Oh, yeah. Oh, I went to Vulcan a bunch of times. In fact, I actually won a Star Trek trivia contest at a Star Trek convention. This would have been in, probably 82, 83, somewhere around there.
Congratulations.
Yes. So mostly because they didn't ask serial numbers. They didn't ask me serial number questions, which I would never have been able to get. But
do you remember any of the questions they asked?
No. It was too long ago. I just remember being nervous because I'm going like, oh man, I'm like one of the finalists. What if they ask me a serial number and I cannot, because they had asked some people serial numbers. And I'm like, I am not going to remember that. Except the Enterprise, of course, but not like, what's Kirk's serial number? How have I know? I don't remember that. But no, I got it. And I won a script. I won the script for, which episode was it now? Squire of Gothos.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. I won a script with the Squire of Gothos.
Oh, that's wonderful. So you went to Vulcan, you won a script. What was the best part of going to the convention for you?
The best part of going to the convention for me was, being with like-minded people was always nice. Being with people that you can talk about things with and they know what you're talking about, which in those days was not so much of it was harder. You know what I'm saying? It was not as much of there was no internet, right? So it was not, you didn't necessarily have like-minded people at your disposal, easily. And so you had to kind of go out of your way to do something like that. That was nice. And it was also nice that even though it was a Star Trek convention, it was also a more generalized sci-fi convention. And so it was really cool to be able to see on the program, I've never seen that movie. Because, of course, again, in those days, this is pre-video cassette revolution. So if you wanted to see a movie and you hadn't seen it, you might know this movie exists from reading about it in magazines or whatever, but you've never actually seen it. It's never been on TV. You can't get a copy. And, oh my gosh, they've got a copy of A Boy and His Dog, let's say, or Zardoz, I saw one of those once, and a few others like that. So non-Star Trek things, but still the more general science fiction universe, which again at that time was not so easily accessible as nowadays.
Yeah, when I was growing up in New York City, I had the people that I went to high school with, and some of them were Star Trek friendly, and some of them were full-on fans. So that was something I could talk to them about. But the locus of many of our nerd events was a local hobby store.
Yes.
And you'd go to the hobby store and, you're either building plastic model kits or, building whatever kind of crazy thing they had in there or playing role-playing games or Star Trek, right? Or Star Wars. And that was all where that stuff happened back in the day. And all you could get wasn't online. It was you'd get a magazine or a fanzine mailed to you.
Yes.
And that was it. Okay, so you have a big DVD collection. You've between you and your girlfriend, you've got all the ones now. So I would challenge you, Maggie. You have no excuse not to see all the episodes because you have them all in the house
I have
on
no
disc.
excuse. I'm still really. I'm sorry. I know that this is heresy for some people, but Voyager just doesn't tempt me. I just don't. No. I'm just no. I know that there were some good things about it, but I also know that I've talked to fans who find some things about it infuriating. But I definitely want to see those last two, I think, seasons of Deep Space Nine. What I'll probably do is start from the beginning and rewatch the whole thing, because it's coming in, in the middle again. It was like when I first started. It was after the Maquis had become a big thing, and where Riker had gone off to be with the duplicate Riker, had gone off to be with them, and where there was some Vulcan. There was one episode with some Vulcan woman who was like a big Maquis player. I remember that one, and then of course all the things with the Jem'Hadar, and so I saw the beginning of that, the beginning of the war with the founders, but I didn't see the end of it. And everybody says, again, that's some of the best Star Trek. So I'm like, I got to get around to it.
It is very good. It is very good. But I will also defend Voyager because I have not seen all of Voyager as we sit here and record this. So I had only seen a little bit of it before I sat down to actually start watching it. And I have been live tweeting as I've been watching the episodes. And I will say I thought it was much more delightful than I thought it was supposed to be. I thought going into it, I was supposed to hate it, right? And I'm supposed to hate this particular character and that particular character. And I was like, this character's great. I thought it was wonderful. So I would say, don't let other people tell you what to think about it. Just go check it out and make up your own mind. Give it a shot.
Well, my best friend, whom I call Grace on the blog, I give her kind of a stage name to protect her identity. Her Twitter avatar is 7 of 9. So, I mean, she loves the show. But...
Seven is a great character. I think you would particularly like her, but that's up to you to decide. So I say we jump in and we start talking about some episodes. What do you say? Are you game?
I'm doing it.
All right.
Let's do it.
So the M5 gave me a list of episodes that we should talk about, and the first one is hey, don't laugh at the M5. He's very sensitive. If he starts feeling bad, I have to pay for therapy. It's a whole thing, and I just don't want to deal with the insurance right now. So just let's keep everything nice with the M5. So anyway, let's talk about the Doomsday Machine. In one of our emails back and forth, we were talking about this episode. You said it was one of the very few episodes of Star Trek that actually would work as a stage play.
I thought so. Yeah.
Tell me what you were thinking about there. Say more about that.
Well, I mean, for one thing, it's only 2 sets. I mean, really. I mean, yes, of course, there's the special effects parts with the Enterprise fighting the machine and the destroyed Constellation, but really and truly, 90% of the action is either Enterprise bridge or Constellation engine room. That's it. And that's an easy thing to do on stage, right? Plus, very small cast, no special makeup. I'm not sure how we would... I mean, on a stage play, you'd have to do something with you'd have the characters describing something that they see off screen or whatever, or you could have a screen and show the special effects scenes of the machine shooting the beam and all that stuff. You could do that on a screen, right? Because we don't see it directly. We see it as a thing. And so it's, I think it's just, dramatically speaking, it's one of the most pure, I guess is what it's a pure drama. It's one of those episodes that I feel like transcends its genre. Do you see what I'm getting at? I
think so.
You could almost rewrite it to not be science fiction if you wanted to. Because there's probably a way to do it, to where you could make the menace something else, and the drama would still be basically intact. You'd still have the collapse of Decker's whole world because of a very bad mistake. But they get a lot of people killed. And that's the thing, too, about him, is that he's not a villain.
No, he's not a bad guy.
He's the chief antagonist, but he's not bad. He's a good person. He's just been driven way, way over the limit of what a human should have to endure. And he's just collapsing. And so that's it's a very mature episode. I think, is one of the things I like about it. Dramatically speaking.
So let me ask you about William Wyndham's performance as Decker. Do you feel that the way he portrayed the character was too much, not enough, or just right?
No, just right. Just right. And I know I've heard some people making fun of the what I think is one of the strongest scenes, after McCoy has first given him the tranquilizer and he's become verbal again when they first meet him. And Kirk is like, and he says, I beamed all my crew down to the fourth planet. And Kirk is like, Matt, there is no fourth planet. And he turns to him and goes, don't you think I know that? I love that. It's so intense. It's so right from the heart, and you're like, oh, this is a person who's really suffering.
When I watched that scene in preparation for this, the one question I had in my mind, and I'm sure I could actually find it somewhere in some of the reference materials I have, and I failed to look it up, but as I watched it, I kept thinking, I wonder how many takes that was. Was that his first take? Because that's glorious.
That is
beautiful. Glorious
I
if
love
that's
it.
his first take,
it's
right?
Extremely well done. And Wyndham is one of those underrated actors of the 60s, I think. I've seen him in a lot of things. And he never was a starring role. He never had his own show or anything like that. But I'm like, no, this is a fine actor. There's an episode of a Night Gallery called They're Tearing Down Tim Riley's Bar, which is it's another exploration of one of Rod Serling's favorite topics, which is the harried businessman who is kind of like yearning for a simpler life. And Wyndham, he finds out that this bar he used to hang out with his friends when he was younger and less busy, that they're tearing it down. And he has to kind of mentally accept that. And it's a great performance. It's a very different character from Decker. This guy is not pathetic because of some great tragedy. This guy is pathetic just because he's an ordinary working guy and life has ground him down slowly.
He has a graveliness kind of in his voice that I think works wonderfully in the role, especially, right? I mean, I think especially in the line you reference where there's all this pathos in it. And I think it just feels, you really feel it as you're watching it. So I'd agree with you. So would you characterize this as an episode that is meaningful to you personally, or is the best of all Star Trek, or a little bit of both?
That's a good question. I just think I don't think it's particularly meaningful to me necessarily. I don't have any memories of watching it that are particularly talk about me, and I don't think there's anything particularly in it that says anything about me, you know what I'm saying, as a person. Because I think sometimes when what we like in fiction can say something about us, right? Can say, right, we like it because of this, because it speaks to us about in this level. Doomsday Machine is not that for me. It just speaks to me in the sense of, no, it's just good drama. I would say that. It's harder for me, actually, to say. When you talk about personal, what's personal? Because I started watching Star Trek at such a young age, and so many of the episodes just seem to me to be part of my life. You know what I'm saying? It's hard to take one and go, oh, this one. The only thing I think I can say about that is a couple of the funny episodes, Trouble with Tribbles, and Piece of the Action particularly, that I can remember. My dad was a kind of a stoic man. He wasn't very verbal, very talkative. And one of the times that I can remember, one of the ways we used to bond was over shows that we both liked. We used to sit and watch nature shows together, nature documentaries, The Undersea World of Jacques Cousteau and Wild Kingdom and things like that. Yeah. And Star Trek. We used to watch Star Trek. And I remember sitting on the floor, this would have been in my teens, late teens maybe, just before I left the house. And sitting on the floor watching Star Trek on the local station reruns in the afternoon, late afternoon. And my dad was sitting on the couch behind me. And I can remember during Trouble with Tribbles and Piece of the Action that I had never heard him laugh so hard the whole time I had known him, then or after. he laughed and he laughed and he laughed and he laughed. And that's just a very personal, meaningful memory to me, because it's not something I was able to share with my dad that often. He was just not a jocular person. And so that was just a meaningful, I remember those. And I think that they hold more of a special memory for me because of that.
I think that Star Trek is rife with things like that for a lot of different fans, because doing this show, that's a thing that always comes up on the podcast. And people will tell me, oh, this episode I want to talk about. And I'd say, now, why did you pick that one? Because it's certainly not on anyone's top 10 list. And, like a piece of the action. And they'll say, oh, because I had a great bonding experience with this other person, right? Yes. And that makes the epised special to you, right? So if it comes on, you're going to want to watch it and you're going to want to enjoy it. And you have a different relationship with it than other people might, So if you were to say, if someone was to ask you, what are some great episodes of Star Trek? And you were to say that, people would say, what? You're out of your mind.
Right.
But it means something to you, and that's okay.
It does. It does. And it also goes off into things like when you look at, I don't know if you remember, it's a throwaway detail. One of the things I loved about Enterprise was that Enterprise did a lot of fan service. Enterprise did a lot of, here's this loose knot from the original series, let's tie it up. And I don't know if you recall, but their navigator, was it Travis was his name?
Travis Mayweather, yeah.
Travis Mayweather. That he was raised on the Horizon, which was the ship that dropped that gave the books that caused the contamination in a piece of the action.
Oh, was it?
Yeah.
Oh,
the
wow.
Horizon.
I did not recall that. So that's
it was just
wonderful.
fan service. It was just because they never say anything. He doesn't tell the story. Oh, my family stopped at this. No, they just throw the name out. I was raised on the Horizon, and you're like, oh, right, the Horizon, and the time period is right because Kirk says it's 100 years ago, so the time period is correct.
So I love
that.
I love it when they walk a fine line. So, for instance, as we record this, they've been releasing these short treks, which I know you haven't seen. But in one of them, without giving any spoilers away, one character is talking to another character, and they're Starfleet people, and they say something about a reserve activation clause. And I remembered, oh my gosh, that's the same thing that's mentioned in Motion Picture, right? Yeah, when McCoy comes on board. So I like stuff like that.
Yes.
What always sets me on edge a little bit is how in the great big galaxy we keep running into the same people and the same like three races over and over again. Yeah. That kills me because it's like small universe syndrome, right?
Yes.
So if we run into a Trill, it's got to be Dax, right? Because basically there's only one symbiont as far as anyone knows for the Trill. I think they all that other stuff is made up because the only one we ever seem to run across is Dax, right? And so too much. It's like wasabi. You just a little dab will do you. Too much, and it just overpowers the dish, I think.
No, and my husband's a huge Star Wars fan, like gigantic Star Wars fan, and Star Trek was second for him in his love. Star Wars was first, but for him, he always used to make fun of the same thing, right? Of like, how many planets are there in the Star Wars universe? Like 4? He loves the show, but he can still mock something silly like that, and same here, right? I mean, we can mock Star Trek. We love it, but we can still say, yeah, come on now, Riker, we no longer enslave animals for food, really.
Yeah, well, we see those miners and all those colonists living out on these planets out there. I imagine there's plenty of that. But, I think the Federation as a society is one of these things that you just really can't look at too closely.
Yes.
Because they never really tried to make a consistent world.
No.
And, so for instance, Game of Thrones, whatever you think about the show, there is a whole backstory and a logic to how the universe works that's explained in the books. And even little details wind their way up into the story, and things are meant to be consistent. And if something is not, that's a story point as to why it's not.
Yes.
Whereas Star Trek never made us that promise that, every single thing makes sense and we know how the economy works and we know how this and that and all these other things work. No, you don't. No, you don't, man. Just it's folly, I think, when people try to sit there and make sense of some of this stuff, because I just don't think it holds up.
Well, that's a problem, unfortunately, when you have a TV show, American-style TV show, where you've got the writers are just submitting scripts, and then you've got a story editor who's trying to make sure that it fits into the universe, but sometimes they screw up, and so you have the contradictions and and especially, of course, really early in any series, right? The first 20 episodes or so, there's usually going to be a bunch of contradictions of, oh no, we kind of dropped that later, things like that. Like, I remember in one of the early, Tomorrow is Yesterday. Mm-hmm. Kirk says something like that the authority that the Enterprise operates under is something like the United Earth Space Probe Agency.
Yes.
And you're like, what?
What is that, right?
Yeah. And they dropped it. They just dropped it. It goes away,
Yep.
And Harry Mudd calls Spock a Vulcanian in Mudd's Women. Although, of course, that could just be his ignorance. You can explain it that way. You can plaster that plot hole,
I would say that, but Spock also seems the kind of guy to me to be very pedantic and would probably have corrected him.
True. Yeah, true.
That seems like a very Spock-like thing to do, or a very Vulcan thing to do.
Although he's very uncomfortable in that scene, and I think he just wants to get away from Harry Mudd. It's kind of like, yeah, dude, whatever. Yeah, Vulcanian, okay, whatever.
Well, that's fair because Harry Mudd is a straight up 100% legit slaver, right? The guy, he is not a good guy.
No.
So I don't blame people for getting away from him. In fact, as we record this, I just saw the other day that there's a Star Trek Online game, which is very popular, and they just opened up a Harry Mudd store, and some people were quite critical, saying, let's not celebrate this guy. He's kind of a bad dude.
Well, they could go with Cyrano Jones instead.
That might be a better choice. Choice.
He's the guy that was more of a, he was the trading small things, on Tari and Glowwater and Tribbles and
exactly.
Spike and Flame Gems
and not people.
Not people.
not people. So the M5 put a little note here and said, well, you don't really have to talk about this episode, but he told me that I should ask you about the animated episode Beyond the Farthest Star, and there's something in there that you wanted to talk about. So why don't you tell me, what is it about that particular animated series episode that caught your attention that's worthy of our time?
There's a couple of things, actually. One of them is that, I was quite young when I saw it for the first time. And I was really digging the fact that Filmation, the studio that produced it, that the episodes were so adult. They were not necessarily, it was on Saturday morning, yes, but they weren't really written for kids. They were written for Star Trek fans. And that episode was one of the ones that first struck me as to how much so that was. We were talking earlier about Wyndham's character not being a villain in Doomsday Machine.
Yeah.
But in Beyond the Farthest Star, we've got the adversary is an actual bona fide villain. It's a monster. It's a basically an evil spirit, a science fiction version of an evil spirit that possesses ships instead of possessing people. But at the end of the episode, when they finally get away, which is, if whoever hasn't seen the episode, I'm obviously not revealing anything. We know the heroes are going to get away, right?
You can spoil it. It's fine. I spoil warning everything right up until the current day as we record this, so you're good.
Okay, good. Well, the thing is, as they're getting away and they've left the entity behind, it's crying over the radio, begging them not to go away because it's so lonely. I'm like, whoa. It's like it's actually pulling at your heartstrings because, yes, what it's doing is evil. Yes, we have to get away. And yet we have this creature that is not... Its motivations are not completely alien. And the fact is, who among us has not maybe done things we aren't proud of because of some emotion like loneliness? And really, when you get down to it, it's a callback to Charlie X.
Say more about that.
It's, because you've got an alien, because Charlie is physically human, but his powers are not human.
Right.
He's too dangerous to be allowed to be around. We've got to get rid of him. He's wreaking havoc. He's going to kill people. Well, he has killed people, but yet his motivation is very understandable, and it's the same one. He's lonely,
right?
He's
lonely. In a way that I think adolescents feel much more powerful, right? Because when you're an adolescent, especially, you're really all about your peer group, and it's a little bit different when you're maybe a middle-aged person, And so I think you really feel it in Charlie X, particularly, right? We all remember those incredibly awkward teenage years, right? Trying to relate to other people was so important to us. And now we look back at it like, well, why did I care? But at the time, it seemed like the be all and end all of the universe.
And both of them, both Charlie and the entity in Beyond the Farthest Star, both lack the social skills to make friends. They both think that the way to do this is just to basically throw their weight around and take what they want. And of course, it blows up in their faces in both cases. But in Beyond the Farthest Star, the other thing really is just that it's very illustrative of something in the animated series that we didn't see in live-action Star Trek really until Enterprise. Maybe Deep Space Nine. In that you could depict things, because it was animation, you could depict things on the screen that you could not have depicted in the original series. The special effects budget simply wasn't there. If you cannot build it as a model, or do it with makeup, or do it with some 60s special effects like phasers and stuff like that, if you can't do it with those tools, you don't do it at all.
Right.
And so in animated series, there were 2 crew members who were not human.
Right. We have Maress and Lieutenants Maress and Eriks with the 3 arms.
Yes. And so you could do that, right? Whereas you could not have done that pre-CGI. And the ship in Beyond the Farthest Star is one of those. You just couldn't build that thing as a model. I mean, for one thing, it's immense. The Enterprise is just dwarfed next to it. And the other thing, it's just very weird looking. It doesn't even look like... They managed to create something that was like, what kind of a race would build something like that? It doesn't look... It looks more like something, we see that the aliens are insect-like, and it does look kind of like something insects would build. Like a big series of pods connected by tentacles sort of thing.
Right. Have you seen the remastered original series episodes, or are you just watching the... Okay.
No, I just have the DVDs of the original ones.
If you ever get the chance, I would strongly recommend going and checking out the remastered ones, because they went back and they fixed a lot of that stuff. One example that comes to mind was the Corbomite maneuver, where they have the Fesarius, that big ship made of Christmas lights. Yeah. And it looks kind of okay in the original series, for what they could do. But in the remastered, while keeping it in the same look and the same style, so it's respectful of the original material, they really made the Fesarius look like some gigantic thing, and they really got the scale right in a way that they couldn't have done back in the 60s. It really did improve the episode dramatically with like the effects in that particular one. And Doomsday Machine, the Doomsday Machine as well, I would also say.
Well, these are things that are supposed to look scary. I mean, that's the thing, and when you sometimes have, there was an episode, a more recent episode, I don't recall exactly, 10 years ago maybe, of Doctor Who that I was watching with a friend of mine. And I said, is it just me, or did they actually manage to make the Daleks scary again in this particular episode? And it's tough. It's tough when you... I'm not a person who, as you can see from my comments on Doomsday Machine earlier, I'm not a person who thinks special effects are the point of science fiction. But at the same time, if you've got something that's supposed to be scary, I really kind of want it to be scary, right? I don't want it to be sort of like, yeah, I know, dude, you built that in your basement. I want it to be scary.
Yeah, effects are, to me, I think of it like a little bit of spice on a dish, right? You're not going to save the dish with a little bit of spice, but boy, if you do it right, it really kicks it up to a whole new level.
Yes.
And that's, I think, the line they walked with the original series remasters, is they really did that well. Whereas if you look at, what happened with the Star Wars films when Lucas went back and he totally recut them, it's he really changed sort of the source material in a way that I think actually detracted rather than enhanced. But that's a discussion for another time. If you got complaints about that out there, people, you can go ahead and tweet at me. I'll be happy to educate you on my opinions about that. So let's talk about a Deep Space Nine episode. So let's mix it up a little bit. Let's talk about Blood Oath.
Blood Oath.
Yes, a delightful one. So tell me, what is it about this episode that made it on the list?
Well, I mean, it's the same thing I was saying about Enterprise. It's that callback. When I sat down to watch this episode, it was on, first on the air, and watching it in real time, right? I was as soon as which one was the first one to walk on the screen? I mean, it was Kang, Kolos,
Kang, Koloth, and Kor.
Koloth and Kor.
Right.
And I don't remember which one is.
I don't.
Kor, I think, is the first one on. I think he's drunk in the bar, I believe, is the first one to come on the screen.
Yes, and he gets put into jail, and that's when the other ones show up.
Right.
Okay.
And I'm sitting here going, he looks familiar. He looks really familiar. And then when Koloth shows up and when they start throwing names around, I'm going like, holy these are like the commanders from the original series. And then, of course, when it's all three, and I even went back into my Star Trek Concordance, the B. Joe Trimble, the blue cover with the saucer cover, and said, is that all the captains that we see? Yes, it's all the captains that we see and hear their names in the original series. I mean, there's a few other Klingon captains, but they're kind of just like on the screen and off. They're not really a character per se. But those three are the three. And so as soon as that came up, I'm like, oh, wow, how are they going to do this now that we've got the deeper exploration of the Klingons? Now that they're not just two-dimensional villains anymore. They're not just the bad guys. Now that we've begun to explore their culture in these newer series, what are they going to do with this? And I loved it. I loved it. I loved especially the way that all three of them coped with the downfall of their world in different ways. Like Kor becomes a drunk, Koloth buries himself in his martial arts, and Kang is just angry and bitter. And so angry and bitter. I mean, he has that speech. I can't quote it exactly, but it's where, once the name of the Klingon Empire made star systems tremble, and now we open restaurants and serve gawk to the grandchildren of men we slaughtered in battle. I mean, that's great. That's so great. I was just sitting there going, you kind of get this fangirl thing, that kind of, when you get like that, you just squeeze. This is so good.
So you like the Klingons for sure.
I loved it. And I love the way that they really explore a little bit too. I mean, in a lot of the episodes, they kind of, one of the flaws of Deep Space Nine that I can see, and maybe they fixed this in the last couple of seasons, I don't know, is that they kind of gloss over the Trill weirdness a bit. In a lot of episodes, you don't stop to think of how weird this really is. You know what I'm saying? How different from other species' experience their experience is. And then so we have the Klingons show up to see if Curzon is going to... And then they find out that Curzon is now Jadzia. And it's kind of like this awkward, thing where it's like, you don't have to come with us because you're not the same person as you were. And the Klingons are kind of chauvinistic. The Klingons are not exactly egalitarian in their gender stuff. And so you can kind of see that awkwardness is there too. Like they don't want to insult Dax, but at the same time, oh, come on, a girl's going to come with us. It's kind of like a bit of both. And I like that. I like that whole, I think it was a good psychological exploration. I think it was a good, everything about it I liked. I liked that episode. I just thought it was a really good episode.
I know that I'm going to get into trouble with a vast number of my friends for saying this, but I did not care for the character of Jadzia Dax at all.
Really? It's interesting. I would not say she was one of my favorite characters or anything, but she was all right. One of the things I liked, one of the touches I did like, in fact loved, was Sisko with a smirk always calling her old man. I loved that.
Oh, I love that too. And I loved Terry Farrell's performance. As the character. What I did not like was, and this might be the fact that I worked with this person a long time ago, who was one of those people that you could come to work on a Monday and they'd say, how was your weekend? You're like, oh, I did this amazing new thing. And they're like, oh, I've done that. Oh, you ate in that restaurant? I ate there 3 times. So, yeah. Oh, yeah. You went and did this thing? I did that 7 years ago. Like every single thing you do in your life, they know all about it and more than you, and did it 17 times and to a higher degree of excellence.
Yeah.
And because
Is that Jadzia or is that Dax, though?
But that's Dax, right? He's
Dax.
like, yeah, I was a gymnast. Yeah, I was. And so every single time, like, they bring something up, and Dax like, oh, I know all about this because I used to be a musician. I used to be a this. I used to be a that.
Right.
And I just kept thinking to myself, oh my God, I'm having flashbacks to my annoying coworker, and I hated that. I hated that so much. One time I came in and I said, I don't know if I was telling you this. I was talking to my coworker. I said, I actually had my private pilot check ride. I am now a private pilot. And she's like, oh yeah, I have one of those too. And I was like, oh my God, that's it. I'm done. I'm not talking I'm not saying anything else about anything I'm ever doing to anybody. And when every time I see Dax and, someone says like, oh, we're going to do this really hard and peculiar thing. And she's like, I've done that 17 times. It's like, oh God, so I realize that might be my own thing. But that's why I don't connect with the character. That might be the most charitable way to say it. I can
see that. No, I can see that. I think every science fiction series really has to have, it seems like, or they think they do, has to have a know-it-all character. Certainly all the Star Treks do. I mean, of course, in the original series, it's Spock, and in Next Generation, it's Data, and in Deep Space Nine, it's kind of Dax, the character who in a way can just pop up and provide this background for the audience that, oh my gosh, it's the Big Headians, and the know-it-all can say, we haven't had contact with them since, in 50 years kind of thing, to kind of like providing that back thing for the audience. But it can get annoying.
Yes, it certainly can. So I want to be very clear. I love Terry Farrell. I think she's great. And I get what they were trying to do with the character, but I guess I had a bad experience with my coworker and it put me off.
It rubbed you the wrong way.
Yeah, it just put me off the whole thing. So if you want to tweet at me or yell at me, feel free.
Riker, I don't like Riker. I've never liked Riker. Never. I always, I know they were trying to make him Kirk-like, and I don't find him Kirk-like at all. I find him, I get where they're going with him, but he's...
What, you have to define what you mean by Kirk-like first.
Well,
what does that mean?
They were looking for, I think, because they wanted the captain to be older and wiser and not really like Kirk. And I think they kind of wanted a Kirk-like character. Younger, brash, clever. You know what I'm saying? But the thing is, for me, and I don't know if this is the writing or if this is the acting or just the decade or what, I believed it with Shatner's performance of Kirk. I didn't so much believe it with Riker. It didn't seem... It seemed forced somehow. It didn't seem, it's hard to express this, I think, in words. It's just a sort of a dislike, like just no, you don't quite have that right. Like, no, that doesn't feel natural. Just a lot of things about him didn't feel so natural to me as a lot of the other characters.
That's fair. So let's move on and let's talk about one of the movies. Let's talk about Wrath of Khan.
Wrath of Khan.
Certainly a fan favorite. Certainly,
because it's good. Because it's really good.
Yeah, and certainly on a lot of people's list as one of the best. I think one of the things that some people have said about it, so I want to just give you this to react to, is that it's not necessarily a really good Star Trek film. It's just a good film, and that's not a criticism.
No.
So you would agree?
Yeah, absolutely. To me, one thing that I was a librarian for years, and my undergraduate degree is in English. And so one of the things I see a lot of is people criticizing genre fiction for being genre fiction. But there is some genre fiction that is so good it transcends its genre. Like, for example, High Noon. Even if you don't like Westerns, High Noon is just a great film. I don't like Westerns, and I like High Noon. Mm-hmm. And so there's things like that. There's war movies that are like that. I don't like war movies, but I like Paths of Glory. It transcends the genre.
People should go out and watch Paths of Glory. That's one of Kubrick's earliest films. It's amazing. Everyone should check it out.
Absolutely amazing. And the last minute, I could never stop bawling my eyes out. And Star Trek is like that too. And I think Wrath of Khan is just a great movie. It transcends the genre, it transcends the science fiction genre, and it transcends Star Trek. It does both. It's just a great movie. And even the Moby Dick callbacks do not, I've heard some people criticize the Moby Dick callbacks, and I'm like, no, that's very much on purpose. Nicholas Meyer is doing that very much on purpose. He is showing us, a connection here. And there's just so many great quotable lines in the thing. One of the ones I used to use constantly was when I would accomplish some kind of thing in my husband's absence, and he'd come home and I'd be showing him, because we used to own a ranch, and I'd be showing him this thing I had accomplished, and if he would be like, wow, that's great, I'd be like, can I cook or can I? It's
and
great.
did he know the reference?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, he recognized it.
That's what makes it good.
Yeah, exactly. And it's just so many things. And he's doing that on purpose. I mean, that's not accidental. That's not just a crutch. Meyer's a good enough writer and a good enough director to where he knew very much what he was doing. And the same thing can be said of Montalban's performance as Khan. Some people are like, oh, yeah, he's chewing the scenery. It's like, yes, he's chewing the scenery. And have you seen Space Seed? This is a guy who ruled, something like a fourth of the Earth's land area at one time. This is a guy who's very over the top.
Yep.
He's not going to be sedate. He's not going to be, Khan is a very narcissistic character. He's very megalomaniacal, very much a me, and he even thinks he has a legitimate reason for that. Well, I'm superior. I can be like this. This is okay.
He's believing his own press releases.
Yes, he drinks his own Kool-Aid.
Absolutely. So I particularly love the nautical references in Wrath of Khan.
Yes.
Because I was in the Navy, and so I really dig these little tiny things that they do that just give it that very nautical flavor. It's little stuff that doesn't really affect the show at all, but it pleases me to no end, these little details that they put in. I'm kind of sad that they lost that somewhere along the way. And, like in TNG, when they turned the Enterprise sort of looks like a 80s airport Marriott, on the bridge.
Yes.
It just changes the whole thing. But
kids running around the halls.
Yeah, that was a little different. Different. I shared Captain Picard's original reticence with that whole idea.
Me too.
I wasn't sure about it myself.
No, me too. I mean, obviously in the 24th century, they don't have anything like the 20th century American view of legal liability. Because I'm sure a lot of we're not told, but in all those accidents and bad things happening and stuff, there had to have been some kids killed somewhere in there.
Absolutely. If we think about the original series, I believe we're told at some point, I don't know if this is quote unquote, heaven help me, canonical or not, but I seem to recall somewhere that the Enterprise was the only of the original starships that actually completed its 5-year mission without getting destroyed, chewed up, or something else bad happening to it.
I seem to remember hearing something like that too.
And you think, man, oh man, okay, that's the environment that we're going to put these families into. It seems kind of risky to me, dude.
Well, it's 80 years later, but still, it still seems a bit, But no, the nautical things, and when I remember sitting in the theater, right? Because I saw Wrath of Khan in the theater, and I was dating a girl at the time. I'm bisexual, so I've gone back and forth, but this was and she was a big Star Trek fan. And so we were like, oh my God, Wrath of Khan! We went inside together and it was great. And, but I remember the scene where Spock whispers to Kirk, his maneuvers betray two-dimensional thinking. And as soon as he said that, I'm like, so much this, because so many spaceship battles in movies betray the writer's two-dimensional thinking. I'm like, right, you can move any direction you want. And so that's that brilliant, simple thing they do, just dropping and coming back up, in the nebula. And just such a simple, stupid maneuver, but Khan's not thinking that way. He's thinking naval warfare,
Right. He's smart, but inexperienced, right? As Spock
20th
says.
century. It's 20th
Right?
century.
Yeah, absolutely. He's thinking about it just like you said about naval warfare. But
yep.
It's certainly a film that I think stands the test of time even today. You could put it on and watch it, and it looks great, sounds great. You know, I went recently and watched it again in the theaters. They did some re-releases in the regular theaters, and you could watch it. And I even went to one of the ones that William Shatner was doing. So he's traveling around doing these live Q&As.
Oh, cool.
Where they show the movie and then he comes out and he answers questions and talks and all that. So it was just great. And it's still a beauteous thing to behold on the big screen. And I would recommend to anybody, if you get the chance to go do it, check it out. I want to talk about another animated series episode, if that's all right.
Sure, it's fun.
It's one of the ones the M5 said we should talk about, and this One of Our Planets is Missing.
Yes.
Now, I watched this episode, and I have to admit, there was one spot in the episode where I literally burst out laughing and had to stop. To stop. It's the moment where Spock is trying to mind meld with the
the cloud.
And he's got like his hands out. He looks like a storefront Bible preacher, you know? And I was like, oh man, I got to tweet this. You know, he just looked so crazy. I was like, what is happening right here? And I just get the feeling that if Leonard Nimoy had actually seen like what they were doing, or if he was playing that live action, he would have done something completely different, but not that.
Yeah.
And just the absurdity of it just caused me to burst out laughing. But
it's a very low angle too, isn't it? It was being a very low angle shot.
Yeah, it was literally like some sort of mashup of like Lenny Riefenstahl and a storefront Bible preacher, you know, doing like a cable TV Sunday show. It just was really bizarre. And but the episode to me seemed very reminiscent of the giant space amoeba TOS episode. It seemed to be very similar, right? They get inside this giant creature, although the difference is in this case, it's a sentient being, which they then mind meld with. So why is this episode one that came up to the top of the list? Why did the M5 select it for us?
Well, one of the things is, do you recall that the governor, it's got a callback in it. I love callbacks. The governor of the planet that's threatened is one of the captains from the Ultimate Computer.
Commodore Wesley.
Yeah, it's Commodore Wesley. He's now Governor Wesley. And so I think the M5 probably is partial to the Ultimate Computer, and but also because when I saw Star Trek the motion picture, also on the big screen, my immediate reaction was, this is One of Our Planets is Missing, combined with the Changeling. I mean, that's really kind of what it is.
I see.
It's the giant cloud creature that is threatening all of creation, and the Enterprise has to go into it and basically act as a microbe, like an antibody going into the thing. But then at the center, instead of being a living thing that is just a cloud, it turns out to be a constructed thing, and we've got basically Nomad's brother at the middle.
That's pretty fair.
Maybe you should say Nomad's little sister, maybe.
Maybe. I think it's fair. It's an interesting comparison, right? Because they've worked on this idea in Star Trek numerous times where the Enterprise, in some form or another, whether it's in TOS or TNG, they meet quote-unquote God or some godlike being, which they then engage in some sort of interchange or exchange with, and they end up defeating God. Right. Whether it's, you know, the an arena with the Gorns and the Metrons, or whether it's Apollo, you know, an actual god.
An actual god.
You know, quote unquote god. Or there's many examples of this in the animated series where they meet Kukul Khan and they defeat him as well.
Yes.
So it's been a recurring thing in the show. And plus, of course, you know, humans' creations getting away from it and causing mayhem is another Star Trek favorite, right?
Well,
we see many examples.
Doomsday
Machine.
You know?
We don't know if it was humans that actually created that machine.
No, it wasn't, but it's still technological beings who are mortal.
Right. And, you know, the Ultimate Computer is another example of that, right? And, you know, we've seen examples of where, like the Feeders of Vol, right? They're under the control of this computer, right? And Return of the Archons. It's all very similar ideas.
Yes.
And so
iMud.
Yes, absolutely, right? Where the robots. The robots, absolutely. The Normans and all of those, absolutely.
Only one Norman. Plenty of Trudys and Maisies and one Norman.
Oh, that's right. That's
what Spock tells us. Spock notices, but only one Norman.
It's been a while since I've watched that one. I should go back and reacquaint myself with it.
I remember talking about that one to a friend of mine when I was a kid, my oldest male friend, whom I have known for a very long time, and he was tickled pink. He loved the sequence where Spock says to the two, I can't remember which their name was, but where he says, I love you, but I hate you. Alice. But Alice 57 is exactly like me. He says, yes, that is why I hate you.
Talking a computer into self-destructing is also something they're really good at as well.
Yes. I sometimes feel like I want to do that with computers quite often, actually. I wish I could pull the Kirk on them and talk to them and make them melt down. I would get a lot of gratification about that.
I was trying to explain to my mom how to use computers a long time ago. And the way that I explained it to her was this. I said, you have to understand that computers are incredibly stupid.
Yeah.
They don't know what you mean. They don't understand anything except what you actually explicitly tell them to do in real small terms. The only thing that a computer is really, really fast. Yes. So if you're supposed to click a button and you miss the button and you click off to the side, it doesn't know what you mean or get your drift, right? It's like, nope, you did not click the button, therefore I do nothing, right? Yes. So you have to really talk to it like it's five. In a lot of ways. And I think that's true in Star Trek. We see some of the computers doing that, although at some points they're incredibly smart, but at other times they're incredibly stupid in a lot of ways, right? Where is Commander Riker? Commander Riker is not aboard the Enterprise. Where did he go? He departed at 15:42 hours. Where is he? Where did he go? Unknown. Well, didn't you think to tell me? Or, it's
right,
just,
exactly.
In a lot of ways, this is a critique I've made. I'll be curious to see what you think about it. Is that the Federation in a lot of ways seems to me to be a surveillance society, but in the stupidest way possible.
Oh, sure. I mean, because I started thinking of that immediately when whatchamacallit came out, the Amazon Echo thing, Alexa.
Oh, the Home Assistant. Yeah.
Yeah. And when it came out and people were like, oh yeah, well, it's listening all the time. And I'm like, oh yeah, well, in Star Trek, the computer's listening all the time too. Now, of course, that's on a naval vessel. It's in a military context, so maybe it's a little different. Maybe people don't have that in their homes, but maybe they do. We don't know. How often do we see regular people's homes in Star Trek? I mean, not often. There's
very little. Very little.
I mean, in Conscience of the King, in the original series, we are inside somebody's house near the beginning.
Yep.
And in Next Generation...
Star Trek 3, we're in Kirk's apartment.
Yes. And in Next Generation, there's the one with the guy who was a godlike alien in disguise that was just living like a human.
Yeah, and he destroyed the Husnock.
Yes. We're in their house. And there's the one where Data goes onto that colony by himself. And there's the aliens that are very bureaucratic want to destroy them, and Data's trying to tell them they have to evacuate, and they're like, no, we don't want to evacuate because we built this aqueduct. You see houses in that one too. But that's the only ones I can think of.
In season 7 of Deep Space Nine, there's another Dax that shows up. There's the next version of Dax after Jadzia. And so that's Esri. Esri goes home, and we get to visit her family and her brothers and her mom and all of that. So there is that as well. I believe they live on a Trill colony planet. They're in some business endeavor. And we go to whatever planet they're on. I don't remember exactly where it is now because it was kind of unimportant to the show. But it was on some world where the mom and brothers were living. So you get to see that.
And of course, we see some of the aliens, like in one of the animated series Yesteryear, we see a Vulcan house. And in we see a Ferengi house in the one with Andrea Martin as Quark's mother. Mm-hmm. We see a Ferengi house, but those are not human homes. So different society.
I envision that they have those computers listening everywhere. I think that's just how society works. The computer's listening to everything everywhere all the time. And they just say, computer turn on the lights or computer turn this thing off or play music or whatever. And it's always there listening. And I'm not sure that's a society I would choose to live in.
Me too. I agree with you. No, I agree with you.
So sometimes people talk about the Federation as a paradise, and I'm not bought into that at all. But that's to say I still love Star Trek, and I think that
me too.
Yeah, at the root of it, you can say that I think that Star Trek is about the idea that there'll be a better future at some point. But is it going to be that? I hope not. In my preparations for the show, I looked at some of the episodes that you sent me, and the M5 and I had a chat about it. And it seems that you have a particular interest in the mirror universe.
I do.
Yeah, whether it's the original Mirror, the Deep Space Nine versions of it, the Enterprise versions of it. So, and if you don't know, season 1 Discovery, which is the new show that's on CBS All Access, has a whole big mirror universe component. What is it about the mirror universe that you find particularly compelling?
Well, there's a few things. I think one of the things is I think all of us, and obviously, okay, it's a science fictional version of it, or really almost more like a fantasy because it's not terribly realistic to think about, well, if these characters are all making different decisions, how do they always end up in the same place? It's kind of a weird, mystical interconnectedness. Like, no matter what the Kirk in one universe does, or the Spock in one universe does, they end up in the same ship anyway. And we see this over and over in all the other iterations of the mirror universe, which is kind of neat and mystical and weird. But I think it also gives us a thing. I think everybody who's thoughtful has thought at one time about what would I be like in a very different society? What would I be like? And ever since I first saw the original Mirror, it was very something I thought about. Like, what would I be like in that world? What would an evil Maggie be like? I think ruthlessly ambitious. I mean, because everybody over there is, right? They all are.
Yeah.
Ruthlessly, but what would ruthlessly ambitious look like? And myself as a sex worker, I can really appreciate Marlena's thing, right? She's climbing the social ladder in the only way that is allowed in that society, because it's obviously quite a misogynistic society, right? Mm-hmm. Women have, but they're not command roles. I mean, there's the captain's woman, and the only way she can move up is by moving over to a different officer. And that's how she's climbed the ladder in her society. That's what's been allowed to her. And we see that the reflection of it, and no pun intended, over and over, right, in the different things. One of the things I really loved about Enterprises, that Enterprise used it to tie up another loose end. Mm-hmm. Where did the Defiant go when it vanished from Tholian space? Oh, this is where it went. And that's brilliant, right? And also that the Mirror Archer is, and there's no polite way to say this, is such a loser that he just cannot, the poor guy cannot just get a break. Like, everything he tries fails. I mean, even up to the last minute of the episode, where he thinks he's finally got his break, and no, it's taken away from him. So there's that. By Hoshi. But I love the even the very beginning, the way that they did that one episode, the second part of that, where it's completely set in the mirror universe, and they start it with the alternate credit sequence.
Which I loved, by the way.
Which
it's one of my favorite
too.
parts. Yeah,
I loved it.
Awesome.
I loved it. It was great. And the idea of, oh, right, this is how this universe starts, with Zephram Cochrane, instead of meeting the Vulcans peacefully, as pulling guns out and stealing their ship when they land. Because that's how those people think in that world, in that alternate. So it's fascinating to me. And I've used it like in D&D games that I've run and things like that. The idea of the evil versions of the characters. And when you think about it, I'm not the only one, because this has clearly gotten into the cultural consciousness. You even see things like, I believe South Park, did a mirror universe type episode, and and to signal this to us, one of the characters had a beard.
Oh, of course, because goatees make you evil.
Right. Goatees make you evil. And in fact, I used to tease my little brother who is 6'4". When my little brother came back from college and had grown the Spock beard, and I was like, ooh, the evil Spock beard. And he was like, yes, because he's actually he doesn't look like Leonard Nimoy, but he's kind of built like Leonard, like the tall and straight and this kind of an angular face. Mm-hmm. And so the goatee looked very good on him and I said, that's very satanic. It's got a good, and he's like, oh, I want people to take me more seriously.
Oh, that'll do it if you got if you got a serious Spock beard.
You got the evil Spock beard,
yeah.
But that's what I think it is. It's just that it's a fascinating look at our dark sides, our Jungian shadow, how do these characters, and one of them, especially Evil Sulu. Mm-hmm. Evil Sulu fits into that universe so easily that it's nice. It's one of Sulu's best moments in the whole series.
No, I'd agree with you. Him and Uhura is just it's on fire, that whole scene. Maggie, since you brought it up, I feel like we should talk about it for a second.
Sure.
So you are a active sex worker.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And so part of the job that you're doing is obviously fulfilling fantasies for clients.
Yes.
And so do you feel that there's a connection when you look at those Mirror Universe episodes, that it's all about the fantasy of your bad self, that it sort of ties in some way?
Yeah, in a way. I had a guy once who wanted to do a role play of I was his fiance's evil sister, basically, and I was seducing him to get back at my sister. That was his role play, but I had such fun with it because it was that's what I did. I sort of channeled evil Maggie. This is how evil because real life Maggie would never try to screw up her sister's relationship, but evil Maggie, that's different, right? And it's fun to play villains. I mean, right? It's fun to play villains, and if you're not in a job where you get to act, the next best thing is seeing your favorite characters getting to be villains. So that's I think it's kind of a vicarious thing there.
You'd asked me earlier about what's a meaningful episode and what separates it from a best, right? And here's a case where here's this element of Star Trek, right, about these Mirror Universe characters that you're bringing into the work that you do, right?
Sure.
You're saying, I'm thinking about evil Maggie, right? And how would Maggie do this? And you're using it in your work. I think that's the very definition of what meaningful is. Sure.
I can still remember this scene, like clearly, like flashbulb memory of in the Deep Space Nine version when evil Kira comes on and she sort of saunters. She sort of struts. She doesn't just walk. She struts, like, well, hello, all you little people. What bad thing am I going to do to you today? It's great. It's just such a lovely, and I'm sure that the actress had tremendous amount of fun playing that.
Oh, there's no doubt.
How could you not?
Yeah, how could you not? I mean, I think any actor loves it when you get a script like that, right? You're gonna, if you're just sitting there going, hailing frequencies open day after day, and then you get to do something that's really spectacular. Not saying that that's what that character did, but it's always nice when you get to really change gears and do something completely loopy.
Well, it's what Nichelle Nichols got to do. I mean, instead of hailing frequencies open, it's pulling a knife on Sulu. That was great.
Absolutely. By the way, I just want to say in One of Our Planets is Missing, there is so much great Uhura stuff in that episode.
There is.
It was wonderful to see. And she's really doing it and doing the science and tech and the tech and all that. So it's a really great episode for her.
And Nichelle Nichols does the voice of the Cloud, too.
Oh, she does
that? Yes.
No, I did not. Although I did catch that it was Jimmy Doohan doing Lieutenant Eric's, the three-armed fellow.
He did a lot of the subsidiary voices in that show.
Oh, he did so many
aliens and things,
including Captain Koloth, who I think shows up in one of the animated series episodes.
Yes.
So he does him as well. So I want to ask you about something that might be a little sensitive, and maybe we'll talk about it, maybe we won't. But one of the criticisms I've heard since you brought it up of evil Kira or Intendant Kira is that there's a trope that if a character appears as bisexual, they're evil. I'm not educated enough or have enough exposure to this to sort of have a feeling about it, but I know that I've seen people that I know that have more of an interest in the space talk about this. I'd be curious about your reaction to it.
It's interesting, and your listeners can't see me doing this, but I'm doing that thing where you look up and you're thinking, you're kind of looking into your memory. I think you're right. I think it's even more true with male characters. I'm thinking of male characters that have been shown as bisexual, and yeah, they're usually evil, and female too to a degree. I think part of that is supposed to be. I think what that is basically is that when we live, Americans, we live in a puritanical society, and I think that there is some part of us that was taught as children that decadence is evil. Right? We have that word decadent. It's kind of soaking in sensual pleasures.
Self-indulgence.
And so I think it becomes a shorthand for a writer to say, okay, well, this character, by portraying this character as bisexual, I'm portraying a character who's decadent, who's just, oh yeah, male, female, that's good enough, yeah, whatever, And of course, that's not what it really is like being bisexual. But I'm saying, I think for the viewers, that's what that trope is intended to be. Is it annoying? Yes. But the fact of the matter is, unfortunately, even in real life, there's a lot of people, both in the queer community and in the greater society, who don't understand bisexuality and have these kind of concepts of, when I was coming up, when I was at UNO and hanging out in lesbian bars, there was women who were like, well, you're not a real lesbian because you also, you go with guys. And I'm like, yeah. Because it was just like they don't understand it. It's outside of their experience. You are outsider. And so you become an outsider to both sides sometimes, in a way, because it's kind of like people have this idea like you can't make up your mind or you're going through a phase or that there's a greater chance of you're cheating on them or something, that kind of stuff. And this is a common trope. So it doesn't surprise me to see it work its way into fiction. I haven't really given it a lot of thought, but I'm kind of thinking about it now that you say it. I'm like, oh yeah, that's true. Yeah. And evil Kira is, yes, evil Kira is. Whereas good Kira makes up her mind like a good girl and just goes with one, So sure. Yeah, I can see that.
And for any listeners out there who don't know, I just want to recommend that you go check out Maggie's Twitter feed. She is a vociferous and vigorous combatant. I think is a charitable word.
That's a nice way of putting it.
on Twitter, where it's true. You are an advocate for sex workers' rights,
yep.
And you engage quite vigorously with people who disagree with you and
yes.
and all that. So I knew certainly you would have an opinion on this once I hit you with it, and I knew you'd have a reaction to it that was genuine. So I wanted to explore that with you. So thank you for that. I didn't
welcome.
bring that up until you did, because I wanted to be respectful about your choice to reveal what you wanted to talk about.
Yeah. I'm pretty out about most things. I think people need that. I think one of my main things about being so out is that I remember when being queer was something that was a joke.
So let me one point of clarification. Would you say being out, are you talking about your sexual preference or as being an active sex worker, or both?
Both.
Okay.
Both. But being, I think they're part and parcel of the same thing, because in the 70s, like very few people were out. Right. And then in the 80s, more people started coming out. In the 90s, it became a thing. And the more out queer people became, the more those bad laws suppressing us fell by the wayside, because people saw that we were real people. And I think sex workers need to do the same thing. Sex workers need to be often, when they can, a lot of sex workers can't be out, but I can be. And so I figure by being out, people see that I'm a regular person. I'm not a villain. I'm not a victim. I'm not a vixen. I'm a nerdy chick who watches Star Trek.
Well, that's actually how I came across you, because it was really funny, because you know how Twitter works, and someone that I follow followed you and retweeted something of yours that was a blog post. And I saw a picture of T'Pol, and I was like, oh, let me click on this. And I came across your blog where you write quite extensively about your work, and you write extensively about Star Trek as well. And there's all these Star Trek pictures there, and I'm like, I got to talk to this person and see what this is all about. So I appreciate you taking a chance, and I know it's probably always a risk when you're doing the kind of work you do to engage with people that are not clients. So I appreciate that.
It is and it isn't. I mean, it is in general. It's not so much for me because I do have a kind of big personality, and I am not afraid if people give me to go. Can I say that?
Yeah.
Okay. I wasn't sure.
I'll bleep it, but you're
I wasn't
fine.
sure how G-rated you were.
It's all right.
But, when people do that stuff to me, I'm like, I don't have a problem with flying up in their faces and going, yeah, well.
Exactly.
Get lost. Soak your head.
I notice you're being much more polite now than you
Take a flying leap
on Twitter. All right, let's talk about a couple more episodes. I think at this point, actually, I want to bring up an episode that you had suggested, which was Bound. I think you'll have a pretty interesting perspective on this one. An Enterprise episode, of course, and this is the one where we get the sort of a deeper dive into Orion culture, and particularly, the quote unquote green Orion slave girls. And we have the story there, and we learn the great secret of the Orions, that it's not the men who are enslaving the women, but it's the women who are enslaving the men with their pheromones and their sexual prowess. So tell me why you wanted to talk about this particular episode.
Well, because it is about, really deep down, don't make assumptions about a culture. Don't take your own experiences and project them onto another culture and assume that you are correct, because you may not be. What looks to you from outside like one thing may actually be something very different. And you even in the original series, when you think about it, the concept of the Green Orion slave girls, it's like, okay, so how can you have an entire race that is, have they been conquered? Have they been, what's the story there? And we don't find out, of course. We know nothing about it. We only see 2 Orions in the whole series, original series, and one of them's insane. Mm-hmm. And a patient in a mental institution. So we really don't know much about them. And the other is not really an Orion slave girl at all. She's a character in a fantasy. So in a sense, we don't get to see in the original series any real, actual Orion slave girls. And so when we do see them for the first time in Enterprise, and then they do that deeper dive and show us what their culture is really about, and it's that, as I said at the time, I said, basically we find out that Orion women have raised topping from the bottom to a fine art, which is what they've done, right? They oh yeah, I'm your slave. Okay, I'm your slave. That's fine. Until I don't want to be. And that, right, it's the whole thing in that episode that, I don't remember the character's name, but she basically decides she doesn't want to be owned by him anymore. No, I want you to sell me to this Earth guy. And he is stuck doing what she wants, even though he supposedly is her master. And of course, this gets into kink and all that, too. You get into the whole deep dive of, it's not, what people are about is not always obvious. And you can't make a judgment. And of course, this is something we as sex workers have to deal with all the time, right? People who are not us and don't live our lives, making judgments on our lives based upon what they see in their lives. So if you've got a woman who's monogamous and has only ever been with one man or 2 men or whatever in her whole life, and she can't conceive of the idea of even being promiscuous, much less being promiscuous with people she's never met for money, and she imagines this huge complex of evil, this enslavement and exploitation, and or that, all sex workers have daddy issues, they're all on drugs, they're all whatever, because she's never lived my life. And she makes these judgments and projects this onto my life. And I think that episode, in a way, is a metaphor for that.
Because the Enterprise characters are casting value judgments on Orion culture based on their human myopic view of morality and what they should be thinking about as far as slavery and all of that. And they're bringing a lot of their own baggage into it. Is that how you're seeing it?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So, because, certainly humans have reason to be immediately have a negative reaction when they see slavery. Humans have a very good reason for that. And I'm sure a lot of the people who judge sex workers have good reasons in their own heads for judging me and other sex workers, for judging that. People who have been raped, perhaps, or had just, sexually abused as young, when they were young, things like that. They can't help those feelings. But my thing is that as humans, as fully realized humans, we have to be able to go, okay, my preconception is this. Now you're telling me that in your case it's different. And so now I have to kind of try to put my own feelings aside and go, okay, I'm going to judge you by your experience and not by my experience. Because obviously they've got a function, the Orions have a functional culture.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we don't know how long it's been going on for, but centuries, presumably. It works for them. It wouldn't work for us. It wouldn't work for humans. It wouldn't work for Vulcans. It wouldn't work for Klingons. It wouldn't work whatever. But it works for them. So, okay.
And I think that that's one of the hardest things about putting yourself into the role of like a starship captain or just anybody on board a Federation vessel that's out there in any of the Star Trek series is you're going to come across these cultures which are legit alien. And even though they might look like us or have a nose bump or a forehead ridge or be a different color, that their whole society is based upon preconceptions and a history that we don't even have don't have access to.
Yes.
And so it becomes, I think, a big challenge. I mean, I would find that hard as a person to just travel and, you meet these alien races that are very different from you and you look at how they live. And in some cases in Star Trek, especially I think Captain Kirk was notorious for this, he would go in and be like, nope, this is wrong. We're gonna nuke this and we're going to totally reset the society. Right. We're going to. Because however you're living is just not correct. Right. I'm thinking particularly. Yeah,
that's right.
It's exactly. Yeah, exactly. Like this, even though you're happy throwing rocks down the mouth of this giant snake thing, we're just not having this. And it's the same thing is true in Return of the Archons, although I think there was far more sinister in how that was operating. And I also think about, whichever episode it was with the two planets that did computer battles for war.
Oh, the Armageddon Factor.
Yeah, and then they would, head into the self-destruct chambers, and all that. He said, you obviously cannot live this way and we're going to sort this out for you, right? And he really was imposing his values.
Oh, yeah. Although in every one of those cases, the writers did give him kind of an excuse. The writers gave him the excuse in every one that the ship was threatened. Because Landru is shooting heat beams at the Enterprise and it's gonna lose orbit.
Right.
Val is using a tractor beam, if I remember correctly, trying to
something or other. Yeah, it doesn't matter, but there's something.
And in Armageddon Factor, they
wanted to kill the crew.
Yeah, they declare the Enterprise a casualty, and so in every case, the writers give Kirk an out. But yet, you're right. There is that thing of no, we know what we're doing, and you don't. And that's, I think, I made a very short aside to it earlier, but that was one of the things that bugged me about Riker's "we no longer enslave animals for food." It's like, dude, these are alien diplomats you're talking to. They're completely different from you. Their species is different. You're supposed to be a diplomat here. You're taking them to a diplomatic conference, and what's the first thing you do? Call them slavers.
Right.
Whoa, not smart. Like, whoa, man, you tone that down some. So, feel it whatever you want in your heart. Go into Picard's office and say, wow, I can't stand dealing with these guys. But not to their faces when you're a diplomat.
Do you feel that Archer and the crew of the NX-01 Enterprise sort of learned their lesson after Bound to be a little bit less judgy? Or do you feel like they continued on?
It's almost the last episode. What is it, like fifth to last episode or something?
Yeah, I know, but I'm asking as to what your impression is.
I think it was part of the whole learning curve. I think one of the things that Enterprise did very well is presented a world midway between where we are and where Star Trek next original series is. That they haven't quite learned to be as accepting yet as in Kirk's era, and certainly not as in Picard's era. But they're on the way. They're learning. They're kind of, And one of the things that my husband noticed that he commented on, because he had a military background too, is that he liked the fact that the uniforms looked more like naval uniforms in Enterprise than they do in original Star Trek. It's kind of like a transitional state. They're more, you can kind of see that uniform developing from current military uniforms. Whereas the ones in the original series are quite different from what we think of as military uniforms. So little touches like that. Things like the crawl spaces and stuff like that, it looking much more like a submarine, like a big submarine or like an aircraft carrier, bigger. More space, but still pipes running down the walls and stuff like that. And so that was nice. And I think one of the things I like about Archer as a captain is that he's in over his head way more than any other Star Trek captain. He is totally like, I mean, Picard is in a way the least in over his head of all the captains. You know what I'm saying? Not only is he older and more experienced, not only is the Federation older, not only is his resources greater, you know what I'm saying? He's just much more got a plan that's already been done. Kirk, less so, because, yeah, he's still in an establishment, but they're seeing, you know, they're going pretty much outside the boundaries. They do that. But Archer, everything's new. It's like every single thing they run into. There's no protocols for this.
Right.
There's
He might get a clue. He might get a
anything.
clue from the Vulcan database, but that's about it.
That's about it. You know, other than that, he just has to go on his own. And even though I didn't really care for the plot of them going after the aliens destroying part of Florida and having their, you know,
The Xindi and all that. Yep.
Xindi, I couldn't remember their name. Even though I didn't particularly care for that plot all that much, I kind of liked Archer's character development during it. And I love, especially, to me, one of the most defining moments of his character is when, because, I mean, he's angry. He's totally angry through that whole season. He's just a ball of anger. And he's trying to be, you know, as pragmatic and captain-like as he can, but he's angry. And when that dude is like, oh, yeah, you humans won't, you know, and he puts him in the airlock, and he's like, yeah, well, guess what? I'm going to space you if you don't talk. And he's like, oh, humans don't act like that. And he's like, watch me. And then he finally gives in. And then one of the other characters, I don't recall which other character is it. It might be T'Pol, but I don't recall, says something like, you wouldn't have really spaced him, would you? And Archer just shoots him a look. And you're like, oh, yeah, he would have, because he was at the breaking point.
Yeah.
And I like seeing that. I don't want my captains to be paragons. I don't want my captains to be paragons of virtue. You know, I want them to be human and relatable. That's one of the things I like about Sisko, who is also a New Orleanian.
That's right.
Fellow New Orleanian.
That's right. And I think it's interesting when you think about Sisko, and you brought up the Mirror Universe earlier, right? Like, how come he didn't end up like working in the Cajun restaurant, right? Like evil Sisko, right? How weird is it that he ends up in the exact same part of space,
Yes,
with dealing with the same people, right? It's sort of, I think you're right. It is sort of a weird mystical thing that all these people end up in these exact same places in the Mirror Universe.
Predestination. It's like a predestination thing. You will end up in this spot no matter what.
Fascinating. So I think there's just a couple more episodes I want to talk to you about.
Sure.
Let's do a quickie. I'm not sure how much time we'll spend on it, but what about the Gamesters of Triskelion?
The Gamesters of Triskelion. Well, we were talking about kink a little while ago, right? And just Gamesters of Triskelion is a good example, I think, of an episode that is legitimately bad. I mean, you look at, okay, this is a bad episode. It's just not, the acting's not great, and the plot's a little skeevy, and you know what I'm saying, there's a lot of things about it that are kind of you know, Shatner really overacts in that one. I mean, incredibly, like more than usual. So there's a lot of things like that. But I think one of the things that's really interesting is the writer Margaret Arman seems, I don't know if she's still alive, and I don't know, I've never really done a lot of exploring, but it always seemed to me, when I've seen scripts she's written, there's a lot of kink elements in a lot of her scripts. There's one of the animated episodes she wrote, The Lorelei Signal. And that involves in themes of sexual enslavement.
That's right. All the men get taken over by these space sirens, and the women step up and command the ship and solve the whole thing. It was a really great episode for that.
It is, but there's that kink undertone. There's that whole kink undertone, right? And of course there is in Gamesters of Triskelion, right? We're half-dressed slaves fighting for the masters, I mean, there's some serious kink stuff in there. And Shauna, Angelique Pettyjohn, with her silver bikini and all that, and the green hair. And, I've used this is just a complete aside, but I can remember one time a friend of mine was at my house and staying at my house for a few weeks, and she was a younger Trek fan. And I served her dinner, and it was leftovers. I made a goulash of leftovers, and she goes, "This is good. What do you call it?" And I go, "It is nourishment. We call it that." So, that kind of thing. But I think it's just interesting when you see those kind of like little threads. And when you, as a person, see something that speaks to you, like I said, as a child even, right? Because like most kids, your sexuality is developing and you don't recognize it as sexuality. You don't know what that is. You don't know what those feelings are. You don't know why some things fascinate you. Gamesters of Triskelion was one of those ones that fascinated me, and I didn't know why. Right, because of all these bondage overtones and the collars and that whole thing. And Elan of Troyes, right? Elan of Troyes is Elan enslaves Kirk with her tears.
Yep, with the tears, yeah.
And so there's all this kind of this theme that you see. And I think people who are vanilla people, non-kinky people, I think don't see those things as much. But I can tell you that as a kid with kinky kind of, that when you're watching this kind of stuff, it's like you're riveted. You're like, it's like, what's this? As much so as an ordinary little boy watching a show might be if he saw a flash of tit, that the sexual message is different, but it's still a sexual tone. You know what I'm saying? And you still don't quite know why it's fascinating when you're young.
Right.
Now, of course,
it's the key unturned, right? When you get older, the key turns, and then you have a different relationship with it. Yeah.
Correct. And that's why, like, when I saw Bound in Enterprise, of course, this is as an adult, as in a post-30 adult, who was a sex worker by that time. So by this point, that whole kink undertone, well, it's not even an undertone in that episode. In that episode, it's right out there. And that's, of course, the difference between 60s television and aughts television. But even so, that these tones are there, and I love the exploration of them on the screen and in this universe that is familiar to me.
I think there's a suggestion, and I don't know how intentional it is in the show, in the particular episode, Gamesters, that Uhura is raped during a commercial break. Do you believe that is the case?
I don't think he completes it, because when they come back from the break, he walks away with blood on his face, and he says, "It is not permitted to refuse selection." So she's repulsed him. But he's trying to. Okay. He's trying to, clearly. But my read on that was always that, no, she fought him off. I mean, she's got Starfleet training, she's not a shrinking violet.
Absolutely.
And we see her in the next scene. Her dress is still intact, So I think he didn't expect resistance. I mean, maybe he could have finished the act had he really been committed to it, but he was confused. And let's face it, this character is kind of big and dumb. Yeah. And you're kind of like, he didn't expect that. And even his reaction is kind of like that bewildered, hurt puppy. It is not permitted to refuse selection. Like, I don't understand this. What's wrong with you, bad lady? Kind of a thing. So that's how I read it.
You were talking earlier about the animated series and how some of those episodes were completely subversive, right? The minute you start diving into it. And I feel like the original series in a lot of ways, has a lot of that. And I think we're touching on some of these things now, right?
Sure.
You get really deep into some of these episodes and you start to explore stuff. And I will admit, I don't have a lot of access to some of the stuff you were talking about. It's just not the way that I think. So I'm fascinated in this conversation to hear your point of view on it. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to get you on the show. I want to ask you about another episode, which is an episode that I dislike for one very strong reason, mostly because it puts a character that I really identify with in a bad light, and that's Wolf in the Fold. Anybody
Scotty.
that knows anything about me knows that Scotty is one of my favorites. And I really just didn't like the whole Scotty has a hatred of women and this sort of he's a misogynist and all this. Not that they use that word. I really didn't like that. I thought it sort of diminished the character pretty greatly. And, the guy obviously needs counseling and help if he's got those kinds of attitudes in his head. But I'm curious as to why you particularly thought this was an episode that we should talk about.
For one thing, I agree with you about the Scotty thing. I always thought that Robert Bloch, the writer, who, for listeners that may not remember, the same guy that wrote Psycho, Bloch is, he uses Scotty as a convenient character, and I kind of think it would have been better maybe to have it be a different character, maybe even a lesser character. I guess he wanted it to be one of the mains, I suppose. I suppose that was more the philosophy of television at the time. It's got to be one of the main characters, but it can't be Kirk. And it can't be McCoy because McCoy has to be the one saying, oh, this is why he's like this and all these kind of things. It can't be Spock because Spock is Spock. So it's kind of like they're going for, okay, we got the big three. It's got to be Scotty. It's almost like that. It's almost like they pick him because he isn't playing any other role in the episode, which is lazy. I think it's lazy. One of the reasons I want to talk about the episode, I guess, is that, well, number one, I like horror.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that of the original series, that's genuinely the only episode that definitely dips into being scary. Doomsday Machine's got some moments, but it's a different kind of horror, right? It's more the, oh my God, like a hurricane horror. Like, not a mystical evil force horror. So there's that. And of course, it's another Bloch, for those who've read a lot of him, which I have. He's very obsessed with the Jack the Ripper story. Mm-hmm. Bloch has done like 5 or 6 different explanations for Jack the Ripper in his oeuvre from teenage years to when he died. Wolf in the Fold was only one. The most famous one was called Yours Truly, Jack the Ripper. But there's been a whole bunch of them. And he's just very fascinated by this. And of course, they don't say flat out in the episode that the women that the entity is killing are sex workers, but we know Jack the Ripper. And clearly Argelius is meant to resemble, Eastern London.
Yeah.
With the fog and the dark
physically.
streets and the physically.
I mean, there's a whole nother element, though, which is they talk about right at the beginning of the episode, which is that they're completely hedonistic, right?
Yes.
So even though it has a very Victorian England sort of look, right? The people are not that way.
I think, not. No.
Yeah, I think there's a whole subplot where the guy who was going to marry the girl who's killed, like him having jealousy is like one of their biggest sins, right?
It's a big sin.
You're not supposed to be jealous of anybody else going out and having a good time or fulfilling whatever desires or fantasies they have, right? And he feels guilt about it as he's testifying.
Because it's a very different society, and I think Bloch did a good job with that of creating that different. It's like, no, the cultural assumptions are different. And of course, as a sex worker myself, seeing, any depiction of sex workers on the screen, even if they're just kind of throwaway characters and, whatever, it's also still a point of entry for me. It's a place where it kind of like the episode catches my attention. And it also is one of my little gripes. And I think you'll understand this. If I talk about this to a person who's not a fan,
mm-hmm.
like a big nerd fan, they won't quite get why the reaction.
But we are all big nerd fans here.
Well, big nerd fans here. We'll get it. When Next Generation started and they invented this new planet, Risa, to be the pleasure planet, my first reaction sitting there watching it in the late 80s was, what about Argelius?
Exactly.
Why didn't you just use Argelius? Argelius already exists in this canon. Why don't you use it? But they didn't want it to be that feel. They wanted it to be a different feel, and I get that. But at the same time, it always kind of annoyed me. It was always like,
I'll give you 2 answers to that. The first one is, I think, the correct one, which is that if they did, they would have owed royalties to Bloch.
Yes.
So
yes.
that's the first answer.
Yes.
The second answer is one that I'm making up for myself, which is that it's an example of them not using the small universe, right? Not having small universe syndrome, right? Can't there be 2 planets where they're hedonistic, right? Can't there just be 2?
Yes. Yes. Probably 100.
Isn't that the Maggie universe that you would want, Maggie? Isn't that what you... argue for vociferously on your Twitter account and as you're taking the pleasure police to task for their Victorian ways.
Point. You're right.
Fair enough.
You're totally right. But you're right. No, but in fact, that's why T'Pol became T'Pol, because originally she was supposed to be T'Pol. But then they realized they'd have to pay royalties to whoever
wrote it. Yeah,
Amok Time. I'm trying to remember his name. Who was it? But Sturgeon. Theodore Sturgeon.
Theodore Sturgeon. Yep, there you
Sturgeon.
go.
It popped in my head. It just popped in my head. Yep.
So good. Well, I noticed that you are a frequent and extensive writer on your blog. I mean, there's a whole amount of writing that's up there, and you must be posting multiple times every day, which if you follow me on...
once a day. My blog, it's always exactly one a day at the same exact time, because I schedule them that way, which is very compulsive of me. Twitter is much more free form. Twitter is much more, you can pretty much always catch me on it around 11 to noon Pacific time. But then after that, it depends on what else I'm doing. And today I got off a little earlier to do your show. And it just depends what's going on Twitter and things like that, and what else I have on the burners, and whether or not I'm working or things like that.
I get that.
But I'm a very prolific writer. Compulsive is the word I would use.
Yeah, well, that was my point, is that you are putting out an incredible amount of content on your blog and on Twitter, right? And there's just articles after articles after articles, right? Dealing with sex work and protecting sex workers' rights and advocating for your point of view. But what I noticed is that you have Star Trek sprinkled throughout many of these articles, right? Even if it's just a photo or sometimes a reference to something that only those of us sort of in the club would get.
Yep.
And some of it's more accessible, I think, to the general population who might have a general familiarity with Star Trek. But it seems to me that you've infused a lot of your love of Trek in the advocacy that you do.
Oh, sure.
And
there's one column entitled, we mentioned Charlie X earlier. There's a column with a title from Charlie X. It was one of my advice columns as a reader writing for advice. And the name of the column is Since the Model Came Out. And it's Kirk's line to Charlie, there's nothing wrong with you that hasn't gone wrong with every other human male since the model came out. And I used the picture, if I remember correctly, of Kirk talking to Charlie in the thing. And because this is the thing, when you come to something, I think at such a young age, as I came to Trek, it infuses your thinking. It's a lot of your it's like when you read Shakespeare, and Shakespeare has so many biblical references. Mm-hmm. And so many references from mythology, because this is the milieu in which he grew up. And then, of course, after Shakespeare is now part of our collective milieu, and we can, reference it even in Star Trek. And since Star Trek is, and so it's all these things where you have a well-developed literary universe, so to speak, and you can make references back to it. And it's, in a way, it's a shortcut, because you can say, oh, it's like the evil Spock, and people will automatically get that. It's shorthand. Just like, in a time that was more biblically literate, you could make a Bible reference. Oh, it's like so-and-so.
The Trials of Job or something. Correct.
And people would immediately get what you were saying. There would be that shortcut. Here's a connection for us. It's like Darmok and Jalad at Tanagra. Mm-hmm. Right? Except that here we're presented with a species who only does that.
By the way, every time that episode comes up, I just think about how prescient it is, because now we have an entire communications medium, a lot of the social media, where people communicate nothing but memes, which is exactly what these people do, right? It's exactly what they do. Yeah. And I just think, man, they were so ahead of the curve on that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, memes, which also probably means that they have some other, I would guess, because I've talked about this with people, like, how does this society... How could they become a technical society? And I said, I suspect that they're a kind of a caste society, that there's some technical caste somewhere who uses much more complete communication. Or maybe even only computers do that now. Maybe they're like a really old society, and that's kind of in a sense that they couldn't rebuild anymore if they collapse because they just don't have the tools anymore, the linguistic tools. You know what I'm saying? That they're just,
right.
They've moved into this narrow niche.
One of the questions is there has to be some sort of, I don't know if you're familiar with the website Know Your Meme. But if you ever, so there has to be like a know your meme, like for the young Tanagrans, right? Or
sure.
not Tanagrans, but the young children of
whatever the name of the species
children
was.
of whatever, I forget it right now as we speak. But the young ones, right? They have to learn the context of all of these stories, right? And I guess maybe they can just show them movies a lot and just be like, when we say Dharmagajalad, it's this part right here.
It's this part.
But there has to be some way for them to get access to that. It's something I never fully understood. But
there's got to be because he understands Picard telling him Gilgamesh.
Yeah. It's something that never takes me out of the episode, but it's kind of in my idle moments. It's the kind of stuff I wonder about just for my own amusement, right? So I enjoy pondering these things in my own head. But talking about pondering things, I'm curious as to why you have decided that Star Trek matters to you so much that you put it into all these references. Is it really just because it's a cultural touchstone for people? Because I just, maybe I don't understand the Venn diagram of people who are interested in sex workers and the people who are opposed to you. I imagine you have a lot of people who are opposed to your point of view who read your blog as well, and throwing grenades at you. And Star Trek fans, I'm not sure how much of an overlap is in that Venn diagram. So do you feel like your readers are find it accessible, or do you do it just for yourself because it pleases you so much, or what do you think is going on there?
I think there's not even that much calculation in it. A lot of people have noticed that sometimes people who meet me for the first time but are very familiar with my blog, they go, "You talk the same way you write." And I'm like, "No, I write the same way I talk." And there is a difference. And in conversation, if I were talking to somebody trying to explain something, if I suddenly thought of a Star Trek reference, I'd just pop out with it. Oh, it's like in Star Trek when they did this. And so I do that in my writing too. My writing is tends to be very organic. And I proofread it after, but I'm not a plotter. I'm not a person who does an outline and figures out how I'm going to do this. I just write and then I edit. And so I think I don't know what would happen if I were a plotter. I really don't, but I'm not. So Star Trek comes out, Doctor Who references will come out, Lovecraft references, Poe, a lot of Shakespeare, a lot of the Bible, a lot of biblical stuff. And people are it's so funny that people have these preconceptions, and they're like, "But you're a whore and you're quoting the Bible," And I'm like, "Yeah, I was raised Catholic." I was a voracious reader. I read the Bible cover to cover when I was in high school. I know the literary references, and they are universal. In Christendom anyway. There's all the things. When I'll throw out a reference. I'll say, "Oh, it's like Potiphar's wife," or "Oh, the 10 plagues of Egypt," or a lot of the things of like, "Render unto Caesar what is Caesar's," that kind of thing. I'll throw those references out. And sometimes people get them and sometimes they don't. So it's just one of many. Star Trek is one of those, right up there with Lovecraft and Poe and the Bible and Shakespeare. And I don't quote Shakespeare as much as my friend Gillian Keenan, who can quote it backward and forward, but still Shakespeare.
That's wonderful. So why does Star Trek matter to you?
I think, do we ever forget our first love? It's like Scotty says in that episode where he comes back with the Dyson sphere, right? Relics is the name of it. Mm-hmm. He says it's like your first girl. You never love anybody quite that way again. And I think that's true of properties, of fandoms. You never love any fandom quite like you love your first. And my first was Star Trek. Nothing else I ever came to do I love that much. Not in that same way.
Well, I've enjoyed talking with you, Maggie, but the M5 is signaling me that it's time for the Kobayashi Maru.
Oh, dear. Okay.
The Kobayashi Maru is a challenging and difficult test, cunningly prepared by the M5. Should you not only survive the test, but pass it as well, the M5 will award you an honorary Star Trek title.
Okay, good.
Are you ready, Maggie?
I am ready.
Okay, M5, load the Kobayashi Maru simulator and prepare to record Maggie's responses.
Simulation loaded.
Question 1. Time to pick an evening activity. Attend movie night on the NX-01 or attend a Parisi Squares tournament on the 1701D.
Oh, the movie night, for sure.
Time to take some Star Trek vacation. Visit planet Argelius or planet Risa.
Argelius!
Question 3. If you went to sickbay, would you rather see Dr. Phlox, Dr. Bashir, or Dr. Pulaski?
Ooh, that's a toughie. Pulaski.
Choose your time travel trip. Have an adventure with the TOS crew in 1986 San Francisco or the Voyager crew in 1996 SoCal.
86 San Francisco.
And would you rather arm wrestle a Gorn or thumb wrestle a Mugatu?
Thumb wrestle the Mugatu.
Simulation complete. M5, please compute the results and tell us if our guest has passed the Kobayashi Maru.
Analyzing.
I would totally love to see anybody arm wrestle a Gorn or thumb wrestle a Mugatu. I love both of those choices so much. Maggie, I am pleased to tell you that the M5 has determined that you have passed the Kobayashi Maru simulation. Congratulations.
Thank you.
And now, the M5, who has analyzed your answers, will award you an honorary Star Trek title on behalf of our podcast. M5, what title shall we award our guest?
Maggie McNeill is awarded the title of Chief Recreation Officer of the Argelian Vacation Authority.
So there you go.
Excellent. I will take it.
Maggie, please tell people how they can get in touch with you if they want to continue the conversation.
I am really the easiest way is just to Google me. Google Maggie McNeill, and you see the spelling on the website, I assume, McNeill. And that will lead you to my blog, it'll lead you to my Twitter, it'll lead you to a bunch of nude photos, it'll lead you to videos that I've done, video interviews that I've done, all sorts of things.
Great. We'll put links up to all that on the show notes page at Trek Profiles, of course, just like we do for all of our guests. Maggie, thank you so much for being part of Trek Profiles.
You're very welcome. It's been fun.
Here ends this installment of the Trek Profiles podcast. And before we offer a Trek quote to close this episode, I'd like to remind you that you may send us your thoughtful and detailed comic book guy level feedback, screeds on the impossibility of the holodeck, or your faithfully recreated Shauna cosplay selfies to feedback@trekprofiles.com or on Facebook or Twitter @TrekProfiles. Anything you send us may be used in the show, or it may be sliced up and served as an appetizer in the Klingon restaurant on the promenade. Kapla. This time, I leave you with a quote from the episode The Doomsday Machine, when Lieutenant Commander Scott said, quote, "A cranky transport is a mighty finicky piece of machinery to be gambling your life on, sir." Close quote. Thanks for listening, and live long and prosper.
This handcrafted podcast is brought to you by Stars and Sky Media Lab. It's cosmic.
But production order is not release order, so just know that I always swap
just
that
like
stuff around.
TV.
Yeah. You know, I was actually on a game show, and I was actually on a couple of reality shows too, and not as a contestant or anything, but in like an audience kind of thing. And it was 9 months before it went on the air.
Oh yeah, no, I've
Yeah.
seen that. I've seen that with a lot of the times I do podcasts and things. They're just, kind of quick release, or like, of course, radio shows. Those are usually live.
Mm-hmm.
But when I've done TV interviews and things, yeah, those can be all cattywampus sometimes. I did one for Nightline, I think, that was like 9 months. And I was like, what the hell? How is this even a topic anymore? You know, I mean, you in this day, you know, in this day and age, I mean, it's like you'd think that they'd be a little quicker.
I understand if there's like pressing breaking news and they want to bump it a week or two, but 9 months just seems kind of crazy for a news program. It was
like 9 months. I want to say maybe 8, but around that. A good part of the year anyway.
Yeah. When I actually ate in the Hell's Kitchen reality show. You know, the reality show I'm talking about? With Gordon Ramsay, the chef?
No, I don't watch TV.
It's just a reality show where he runs a restaurant and he's got these 2 sets of chefs that are trying to get a job from him, and but they serve in a real restaurant.
Okay, and kind of like a game show, sorta.
Kind of, except that the people who are eating in the restaurant are really eating.
Real people, yes, they're the judges.
Yeah, kind of, but the whole point is they're trying to get the food out and not screw up the orders and all this.
Right.
And we actually got a chance to eat in the restaurant. We were on TV, and when we filmed it, we heard nothing for like 4 months, and they're like, "Oh, a new season's coming out." We're like, "Great!" And then we turned it on. We're like, "That's not the season. I don't know any of these people." There was a whole nother season that aired between the season we were on and when it actually went on the air. I think it was probably a year and a half. I mean, I was like, "Wow, that's crazy."
Yeah.
And for me, it's just a guess. It didn't matter. But I'm thinking like the people who are actually on the show can't talk about it for a year and a half. That's got to be crazy.
I know.
Anyway. I can look it up. I'll cut this out if
I can't remember. But about Star Trek writers, you know, just as a quick aside, and we talked about Mirror Mirror earlier, Jerome Bixby, of course, wrote that same guy who created Little Anthony, the godlike child in Twilight Zone. It's a Good Life. Same writer.
Boom diggity, we're done.
Yay!
How was that for you? Was that okay?
Well, we had a couple of those little glitches, but you came back from them quick, which really made me happy because sometimes I've done podcasts and things with people, and there's technical errors, and they don't know the software they're using that well, and they're like expecting me to do something. I'm like, I don't freaking know what. I'm a whore, not a technician. You know, I don't know how to deal with this. It's Dr. McCoy. Yes, that was intentional.
I was going to ask you that.
Yeah, I don't know what I'm doing in this. So, right, when it drops, man, I really was glad that you were like, you know, on it and okay.
This is not my first rodeo with this stuff. And for what I found, you know, and I've used several of these different kinds of recording tools for these podcasts. And this one, Squadcast, I found to be really good. It's easy. It tends to run really well. The only thing about it that's a little weird is you kind of have to use Chrome with it. If you don't, it was designed for Chrome, and it just doesn't behave well with some of the other browsers.
I use Chrome. I have a Chromebook. This is a Chromebook I'm talking to you on. So it's, you know.
Yeah, and it ran great. I mean, we were able to see each other. I think the recordings are going to be great.
Yeah, the picture glitched a few times. It just kind of froze, but it didn't stay long. I noticed that you'd come unstuck pretty quick.
And the picture doesn't matter.
No, the picture doesn't matter. But that's kind of an indicator of figuring what the signal was like. And, you know, I was kind of shooting glances down to my my little thingy down here that says how strong your Wi-Fi is. Mm-hmm. And it really didn't waver. So I think the glitches were probably in between somewhere.
Yeah, that happens.
Unless you think they were on your end, you know, because I don't think they were on this end, which is good.
I can tell you I've got some pretty substantial internet connectivity here that I pay through the nose for. I have a gigabyte down, which is...
Oh, yeah, mine's not that high.
So I've got a lot. Yeah, I'm super, you know, as Weird Al Yankovic said, I'm white and nerdy. Yeah. So I have to have, you know, massive internet connection. You know, that's if I was a peacock, that would be my plumage. Look at my big internet pipe, you know. I can download 17 high def videos all at once, you know.
Yeah. We all have our things. We all have our little things we're allowed to be pompous about. Somebody said on Twitter a few months ago, somebody's thing was like, no bullshit, what's your biggest flex? And people were saying like, oh, I did this and I did that and whatever. And my response was, I'm Maggie McNeill. That's all the flex I need, man.
Well, you know, it's funny. I was actually talking to someone who listens to the show. In fact, they might be listening to this right now because this is the kind of stuff that goes into the extended cut that I put on.
Yeah.
And they were saying, oh, every time I see a new episode of your show, I always Google the guest and I always read up on them first. And I was like, I don't think you want to do that for this one. I think it'd be better listen to the episode and then Google and then read. I think it'll be better for you. You know, and only because I, you know, feel free to give me your own impression on this, but I mean, your online persona is quite how do I want to say it? You're ready to do combat with people, you know, and that's how I first encountered your tweets was, you know, someone had retweeted something where you were taking someone to task for their point of view on I think sex workers or something, and you were really letting them have it.
Oh, yeah, well, and Mistress Matisse, my friend, who's a dominatrix, calls me the flaming sword of doom. And whenever she sees me doing that on Twitter, she'll come back and say something like, sword of doom, baby. The other day, I had this guy, one of my regular readers on Twitter, says he's been playing a video game, I think Diablo 3, and he said when he saw the character of Lilith, the demon queen, and he put it in the tweet. He put the picture, and she's very curvaceous and nude and just a huge cape, and you know. But he says when he saw the picture, he says he immediately thought of me, and then somebody else replied, "Me too." And my response was, "I feel so seen."
Yeah. Well, it's good to know that I've had the demon queen of the underworld on TrekProfiles. You know, this is the kind of high quality content we want to bring our listeners right here. This is why they're glad they stayed on to listen to the bonus content.
That's it.
Well, I know it's getting close. I know you said you had a client appointment coming up, so I want to let
half
you
an hour. Yeah, it's
get
fine.
ready for. Oh, okay, good.
Yeah,
I didn't want to.
No, we're good.
Okay.
I hope that wasn't like in your mind bugging you the whole time or anything.
What?
That the deadline, the time.
Oh, no. We
good.
went through everything, I think, right
good.
as we should have.
Good.
I don't think so.
It's fine. I mean, it's 3:30 now. He's not going to be here till 4. And this particular person is very prompt. So he won't be here early.
Okay, great. So, yeah, no, we hit all the episodes I had on the list.
Plus some.
Yeah, plus some. And that's normal. That's typically what happens on the show is, you know, weird other diversions come up and we end up talking about things. So I think that's great. The only thing I will say is that for some reason, I think, are you near a street?
Yes.
Because I hear tons of cars and I think I heard a garbage truck at one point. I can hear all that. Yeah.
That's weird.
So
the microphone the microphone in this thing must be stronger than I think.
Yeah, I can hear all the cars. I heard the truck. I heard the beep beeps of something backing up there a little while ago.
Wow.
But that's okay. Because what I'll do is I actually... some people would say I shouldn't do this, but I do because I'm obsessive. You know, you're obsessive about your writing. I'm obsessive about editing these things. So like I get a separate audio file for you and one for me. So they're separate. They're not mixed together. And so I actually just cut it. So like when it looks like in the tool, it's like you talking, me talking, you talking, me talking. So like when the truck is going and I'm talking, like they won't hear it.
Gotcha.
It's going to be a harder thing for me to cut it out when you were talking, but I will manage that.
You can handle it. I have faith.
Thank you, Maggie, for putting your faith in me. Because I'll tell you, I hate doing it. It is like the most laborious and horrible.
Oh, I can imagine.
Thing editing this. It's horrible. You know.
No, I don't know. It's funny. It did seem like it was a little noisier than usual today. Today's Thursday, which is trash day. So that's probably what you heard. The garbage truck at one point. I don't know what the rest of them. There's a major avenue out my back door. Mm-hmm. So but boy, it seems like you shouldn't have been able to hear that. But
now, I think I heard like footsteps at one point. So if there's like an apartment or something.
Landlord.
Oh, okay. I heard him walking around too.
Yes.
So it's amazing to me the stuff that this thing picks up. I mean, you just never know what kind of weirdness.
You wouldn't think the mic would be that strong.
It came through. I heard it. But I do appreciate you doing this, and I'm glad we did that technical test.
It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, because I think we got a much better recording doing it this way than we would have on the phone. Because the phone just, you don't get the full range of the human voice on the phone.
No.
So it's just not as good.
No.
So-
Yeah, and no, I've been looking forward to this actually because some friends of mine have. I said, "Oh yeah, I'm doing a podcast on Thursday," and they were like, "Oh, well, which podcast?" Because I do podcasts all the time. I mean, it's like not every week, but I'd say twice a month. Mm-hmm. Some new podcast somewhere, you know, and I said, "Well, this one's different," you know, and I said, "This one's a Star Trek thing." I said, "The guy saw me on Twitter and he went to my blog and he saw Star Trek pictures and wanted to interview me." And they're like, "Well, that sounds like fun." I'm like, "Yeah, you know," because usually when I do podcasts, it's heavy subjects. It's criminalization and violence and the police state and, you know, stigma and all this kind of stuff. And just for a change, it was so nice just to do a fun podcast.
Well, you know, all these people who follow you, right? Your fans and your foes who follow you so that they can give you grief about your points of view on things. They'll be getting a whole new perspective on you.
A whole new perspective. But that's one of the things I love. Talk about quoting Shakespeare. Whenever somebody says something like you just said to me, I always say, "Age cannot wither me, nor custom stale my infinite variety."
Oh, that's great. That's great. You know, it's funny, the stuff that comes up, because I find myself quoting Shakespeare every now and then that I've picked up from Star Trek, right? So then I go back and I read the Shakespeare and then I learn that one. And I one of the ones I always like to use is, "I am as constant as the northern star, whose ever fixed quality has been known to mariners since ancient times." You know, and I just didn't do it exactly right there, but I'd have to think about it for a second. But off the top of my head, that was pretty close. And I just love doing that. I quote that all the time when people say, "Oh, you know, that's new for you." I never change. I'm the same as I always have been.
That's one of the funny things. It's funny you say that, because one of the things that one of the gripes I had about nerdy. One of the gripes I had about Next Generation. Mm-hmm. At the time, it doesn't bother me anymore, but at the time, was that the titles of the episodes, that they were addicted to these like one-word descriptive titles, like reunification, or problem, explosion, you know. And when you're like, "Come on, go to Shakespeare or something," you know. What? How about "Whom Gods Destroy"? How about "For the world is hollow and it touched the sky"? I mean, freaking a line from the episode. Something, you know. One
of my favorite things to talk about whenever it comes to Star Trek episode titles, which, by the way, I will say that on the list of things I care about in Star Trek, episode titles is so far down the list. It doesn't bother me. In fact, I think if you've ever heard of that show, there's a show called The Good Place that's on NBC, and they don't do any of that. The title just comes up as like episode 1, episode 2, episode 3, or chapter. It just says chapter 1, chapter 2, and that's it. But that episode that you just referenced, "For the World is Hollow," that was the longest episode title in Star Trek until just recently in Discovery, when they had an episode that was titled "For the what is it now? For the lamb cares not, the butcher's knife cares not for the lamb's cry." And that's the name of the episode. And I always like to refer to it as "the writers care not for the episode title's length." And I always say that. And every Star Trek fan who's seen Discovery, they immediately know which episode I'm talking about. "Oh, you know that one, you know, the episode title, the episode writers care not for the length of the title." You know, they're like, "Oh yeah, I love that episode."
I've just always been somebody, when I started my blog, was like, "Well, why don't you make more SEO friendly titles?" And I'm like, "Because I don't like that kind of title. Because I like calling my columns things that are Shakespeare references and Star Trek references and biblical references and things like that. You know, I enjoy that.
Yeah,
I like them in stories."
You do the blogging, right? Because you're an advocate for your point of view on things. Yep. And I do this podcast. And one of the things about this podcast is, and I'm very clear, I had an extensive discussion with one of my guests about it on another episode, which is, I explicitly do not take any money for this. I don't have ads. I don't have Patreon. I don't take donations, right? It is free.
Pure labor of love.
Yep. You can listen to it. And if you like it, great. If you want to give me feedback, I'll always listen to it. I'm always eager to hear what anybody has to say about it. But, you know, no one has a claim on me because they've given me money for this.
Yes.
Right. And so I won't do ads or any of that stuff. And I think the same thing is true in your blog. You know, you do it because you're an advocate for your point of view, and you're going to put it out there, and you do it because you love it, right? I think it makes the content better. Right?
I think so.
If I got paid for doing this, I think I would kind of hate it.
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah, I can see that.
You know,
I mean, I feel differently about my work, but my creative stuff, creative stuff, yeah, it has to be kind of, you know, because it's one of the reasons I've never, it's one of the reasons my short story collections are self-published. Because I didn't want to have to go through the shit of having to deal with an editor going, well, no, we want to change this paragraph of this one and this of this one. And I'm like, you know what? No, because I wrote them. I like them the way I wrote them. And that's it.
Yep. You know, and that's how it is here. You know, we edit up the episodes, we put them out, and that's it. You know, it is what it is, and you like it or not, you know, and if you want to give me feedback, and I mean that sincerely, I'm always eager to hear what people have to say. And it makes my day when someone cares enough to write it, even if they tell me, you know, you're an arrogant little person and I hate your show. You know, I feel like, thank you for caring so much to write in and tell me that. You know, it means a lot to me that you would actually do that. So thank you for your valuable feedback. You know, well, you're laughing, but I used to work for a cable company, and I ran learning and development for them in one of their locations, and we used to train a lot in the call center for people working in the retail stores and all that. And one of the things we always used to tell people is a complaint is a gift. If they're going to go through the trouble of actually telling you how bad you suck, it's because they want you to be better.
Yeah, I can see that.
You know, so just assume that even though it may not sound like it, they're on your side. You know, and it might be a hard stretch, but, you know, try.
Especially when they're insulting your ancestors for the past 6 generations. And
Oh, yeah. But I mean, I imagine you get way more of that than I do, because I'm just here talking about Star Trek. I mean, you're out there, you know, advocating for a point of view, which is, you know, let's just say your opinions are not heterodox, right? Yes. Yeah, they're not heterodox, right? And that certainly puts you in a place where you're going to attract a lot of haters. And, you know, there's a lot of that in Star Trek fandom, is that, you know, people that I know get attacked online for stuff and, you know, they complain about it. But I can't imagine, it's got to be like 17 levels of magnitude worse for someone who's in your line of work.
Here's the secret, John. That's why I'm so belligerent on Twitter. I'm that belligerent on Twitter because it scares off it scares off all but the most clueless critics. The most clueless critics and the most serious critics. You know, the top 10 and the bottom 10, and all the ones in the middle are like, oh, I'm not fucking with this chick. There's no way, you know. So the ones that are just really clueless and don't have any clue, and sometimes I'll come back to them with something like, oh, darling, you don't have any idea who you're talking to, do you?
I see that, yeah, quite a bit, because people I think just like wade into these battles with you, and they don't realize, first of all, that you are an active worker, sex worker, right? So they're like, oh, well, sex workers are this way and that way, right? And I know nothing about the space, but clearly, if there's someone who's in the space and they're actually working in the thing, you might want to pay attention to what they have to say, right? And people are like, nope, this is Twitter, man. It's all hot takes. You know?
Yep. And I'm just like, nope, goodbye.
Well, I saw the other day you were getting in it on veganism with somebody about the definition of what a vegan is. And
what's sentient? Sentient.
Oh, sentience.
It's kind of like, because I'm like, you know, right? No, sentient. No, it doesn't mean anything that can sense, because trees can sense. You know, bacteria can sense. If you ain't going to eat any of that, you better learn to eat plastic, fella. You know. Oh,
that's right. Yeah. So I enjoyed it because I thought. I enjoy when people are arguing vociferously for their point of view and they have logic and evidence and actual things to point at. So I really like that part of your Twitter account. But I can easily see that some of my listeners, you know, they may not want to engage with you if you picked like the wrong thing on the Kobayashi Maru and they vote the other way. You know, they're like, oh man, I don't want to get in an argument with this woman about whether or not, you know, you want to go visit Risa or Argelius or something. You know,
Argelius is too foggy. I want more sun.
But I think it'll be a good time anyway.